Hello, how are you doing today? Hope things are going well. Welcome to my little video series that I call Crime Dive. My name is Crystal Sky, and if you're anything like me, you find yourself drawn to true crime cases. So, like many others out there, I've decided I also wanted to make videos about it. If you are also drawn to true crime, and you want to feel better about your makeup skills at the same time, you should absolutely like, subscribe, and let's hang out together while I will take a deep dive look into a true crime case while slapping on the old clown paint. So how are you doing? How are you enjoying the fall season so far? As you can see, updated the set a little bit. I definitely should have done some things. I actually kind of broke down my set and then forgot about building it, so I kind of had to hurry up and throw something together real quick. Yeah, there's definitely some things I need to change. But yeah, hope y'all are having a lovely fall season. It is finally cooling off down here. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, with Halloween coming up, right? Like, it's one of my, favorite holidays, but yeah, because of the, last case we covered, the Adrian Shelley case, like, I don't know, it's kind of a little bummer now, because she was murdered, the day after Halloween. So yeah, it's a little bit of a bummer for me now. But yeah, it's just because, I was really drawn to that case, and yeah, I really admire her as a filmmaker. And yeah, I'm still in the middle of going through all of her projects. I haven't been able to watch anything new as of the last recording, but I've got some time coming up during the holiday season that I cannot wait to just veg out, turn the lights down low, and just watch a bunch of her films. That is totally my holiday plans. Okay, anyway, enough of this nonsense. Let's talk about today's case. Today's case, oh my god, it's just so freaking sad. I mean, all the cases we cover are sad, obviously, but this case especially, man. Today, we are going to talk about the case of Abraham Shakespeare. He was a lottery winner who, unfortunately, we'll get all into it, but due to his good nature, and his just kind of good personality, attracted the wrong kind of people in his life. And it unfortunately cost him his life. God, this is such a frustrating one today. Just wait. And I hope you're comfy, because there's a lot to get into with this case. Also, with this case, it's also weird because it's one of those cases, right, where the perpetrator is just so, delusional, and I don't mean that in, a derogatory sense, but, where the perpetrator is just so off in Delulu land that it's dude, what do you do with people? Just you wait. And just real quick before we get started, so two things. One, forewarning, just language will probably be the only thing. I think there's a couple of quotes with some swear words in them, but nothing gruesome or graphic or anything like that. Just really sad. And secondly, I usually try to mitigate the background noise. In case you don't know, I live on a very busy intersection street, and I'm only a block or two away from a school. So I usually try to that's why some of my edits are kind of weird. I try to stop talking or finish my sentence before a car comes by. But today I'm on a little bit of a time constraint, so I'll do what I can with post. I'm not really into audio editing as such, so I just do the bare minimum that I can find on YouTube tutorials. And my in-laws are also with us right now, so there might be some other noise that I just, can do nothing about. But yeah, just forewarning. I usually do the best that I can, but yeah, just wanted to forewarn you. Good Lord, I'm already having trouble talking. And in case you can't tell by the coloring on the collar, why yes, this is one of my makeup shirts. All right, so let's talk about Abraham Shakespeare. So Abraham Lee Shakespeare was born on April 24th, 1966 in Sebring, Florida. His mother was Elizabeth Walker. Not sure who his father is, but he was, I believe, primarily raised by his mother, Elizabeth Walker. And she worked at the cafeteria at the Florida Southern College. Now, Abraham was the youngest of four sons. I don't know his sibling's name. I know the oldest's sibling's name is Archie Powell, but I don't know Abraham's other two siblings. siblings' names. Abraham attended school in Sebring, and other sources say that he primarily grew up in Lake Wales, Florida. And it seemed that Abraham would end up having a little bit of a rough childhood. It was said Abraham was functionally illiterate. He could barely read or write. And it is said that the furthest that he reached in his education was 7th grade. And, interestingly enough, when Abraham was 13 years old, simply from stealing from a convenience store, he was sent to a juvenile reform school and released when he was 18. Yeah. 5 years behind bars for a 13-year-old who simply stole from a convenience store. And yeah, I'm sure the color of his skin had nothing to do with that severe penalty, right? And just in case you have trouble detecting it, that was, in fact, sarcasm. And this is another thing that's just so weird. Okay, so, 5 years for a convenience store. I could find nothing about, him using a gun, shooting someone, or anything like that. All I could find was reports stating that when Abraham was 13, he stole from a convenience store, and for that he was sent to juvenile reform school and released when he was 18. Gee, I wonder why he could barely read or write. Seriously, is there no education mandated in there? Of course not. This is America. But yeah, it just really bugged me in reports when they said that Abraham was a 7th grade dropout, and it's wait, he didn't really drop out. He was thrown behind bars and then released when he was 18. I'm sorry, I just don't understand that at all. Now, Abraham would end up with a criminal background, and it would include 7 felonies and 3 misdemeanor convictions. And they were for things such as, loitering, driving when he wasn't allowed to because he didn't have a license, petty theft, minor assaults for hitting people, including his girlfriend. No, not okay, not okay. You don't put your hands on someone else without their permission. And he would also be cited and actually go to jail for failing to pay child support. So he did have a little bit of a background, and aside from the, assaulting people, including his girlfriend, it didn't seem, nothing too violent or anything, you know what I mean? Again, assaults notwithstanding. But, nothing with, guns or anything like that. And again, I'm not saying that, he didn't do these things and didn't deserve to be punished or anything like that, but let's also not pretend that him being, a black man didn't help in, his penalties and whatnot, or even just getting pulled over. However, despite the reports that he had 7 felonies and 3 misdemeanor convictions, Abraham really only went to jail twice. Maybe with those other convictions, it was prison he was sent to. I couldn't really find anything about that. What I did find said that Abraham went to jail twice, but after the last time he was released, which was in 1995, he lived with his mother, Elizabeth, in Lakeland, Florida, and he seemed to be able to kind of stay out of the law's purview from then. And it is said that he ended up just working any job that he could find. He worked as a garbage man, unloaded trucks, washed dishes. He was a day laborer and worked really, really hard. Now, Abraham had no car, no driver's license, no credit card, had never held a bank account, and he also didn't have a lot of education behind him, right? He could just barely read and write. So, of course, the jobs that he could get, they were, very manual labor, very laborious? Laborious or laborious? Jobs, temp jobs, a lot of temp jobs. But Abraham scraped by and worked whatever he could get. Now, it was said that Abraham was fired from some of these jobs, and other jobs he just quit. And he would later say, quote, "I woke up one day with some money in my pocket and turned over and I said, I ain't going to work, and I just quit. Young, wild, and foolish," is how he described himself. Now, around 2000, 2001, somewhere around there, Abraham had a son named Moses Shakespeare, and he had this son with his longtime girlfriend, Antoinette Andrews. However, apparently the relationship was not the healthiest, not the best. It had devolved into restraining orders, and remember we talked about Abraham getting in trouble for assaulting people, such as his girlfriends. Don't know if Antoinette was one of those, but right? Like, it was said it was not the best relationship. In October of 2006, Abraham was briefly arrested because he fell behind about $6,000 in child support for his son. And as soon as he was out, reports seemed to state that he didn't really stay in too long. And as soon as he was out, right, he went back to working whatever jobs he could find. In his downtime, it was said Abraham really liked to shoot pool with his friends, take daydreaming walks around Lake Hollingsworth, and he loved hanging out at Super Choice Foods. And this was a neighborhood supermarket, and it was described as an artery through the black part of the town of Lakeland. So in November 2006, Abraham found himself in another temp job, and it was unloading trucks for food companies. He was specifically a truck driver's assistant, and he found one of these jobs with MBM Corporation. And this was a food distribution company located in Lakeland. And like I said, they delivered food deliveries to various like restaurants and stuff like that. So Abraham was assigned to go with one of the trucks and help the truck driver unload it. He made $8 an hour. And on Friday, November 15th, 2006, Abraham was assigned an overnight delivery. It was an overnight delivery route. It was going to be headed towards Miami. And Abraham would ride with one of the truck drivers, Michael L. Ford. And I believe Abraham had delivered with Michael before. So Abraham and Michael hopped into his 18-wheeler and began their route. Like I said, they started in Lakeland and they were headed towards Miami. They made deliveries of meat to, like I said earlier, fast food restaurants. So they did a delivery in Lakeland and Winter Haven. And then they briefly stopped at the Town Star convenience store. And it was located on US 127 in Frostproof. And Michael stopped there because he was going to pick up something to drink and some cigarettes. And as he got out of the truck, while Abraham stayed behind, he asked Abraham, hey, do you want anything like a soda or something? Instead, Abraham asked Michael to buy him 2 quick pick lottery tickets. Abraham paid Michael $2 for the tickets out of the $5 that he had on him that day. And it would be one of these quick pick tickets with the numbers 6, 12, 13, 34, 42, and 52 that would win Abraham the lottery. He won the $36 million jackpot. Yeah, from a $1 quick pick lottery ticket. Yeah, he won the lottery. So Abraham found out that very same night, and he opted for the lump sum cash payout. Because you know how you can either be, is it like a monthly payment plan or a yearly payment plan, right? That they like pay you, or for a lesser amount, you can just take like the lump sum. And that is what Abraham did. So he got $16.9 million minus the taxes, of course. And in that same year, 2006, Abraham was awarded like just over $11 million. Reports seemed to vary. It seemed to be somewhere between $11 and $12 million. He told lottery officials that he was, quote, calm and just, quote, I don't have to struggle anymore. He moved out of his mother's house in the working class neighborhood that he was primarily, I guess, like born and raised in. It seemed that his mother had lived there for quite some time. So he moved out of the working class neighborhood and purchased a $1.8 million home in a gated community. It was a 2-story, 6,519 square foot house that included an enclosed pool, security cameras, and 2 two-car garages. He purchased the home in January of 2007 and moved out. Although it was only about 10 minutes from his original neighborhood. Abraham also formed an LLC, a limited liability company, and he called it Shakespeare and Associates LLC, and he formed it with Winter Haven attorney Cedric E. Lewis. And he called Abraham a, quote, good-hearted man. However, the courts also took, what Abraham owed for child support. It was about $9,000. And later, Abraham put $1 million in a trust fund for his son Moses. He gave his stepfather $1 million. Each of his 3 stepsisters $250,000 each. Paid off a $185,000 mortgage for a friend. Paid off a $60,000 mortgage for a man whose last name he didn't even know. Paid off a $53,000 mortgage for another man out of the neighborhood who he'd, quote, been knowing for a few years. Gave one man $5,000, another man $10,000, and he would hand out $100 bills to homeless people who were camped out in front of the Salvation Army. Abraham also invested in friends' businesses, even in businesses of people he didn't even really know. Quote, "I can't count the people I gave money to. Thousands of dollars," is what he would say. Now, most of these transactions were done in person at the Community Bank of Florida. And this is where Abraham would give people, specifically I think people whose like businesses or something he was investing, or maybe like some of the mortgages he paid off. I know people were supposed to pay him back. And it seems to be at the Community Bank of Florida is where like a bulk of these transactions happened. And this agreement, right, that they'd pay Abraham back was more of like a verbal agreement. I'll loan you money, but you'll have to pay me back. And that was just sort of the agreement. Danny Light was the then executive VP of the bank, and he said that him and his employees would always try to direct Abraham to more like long-term financial planning and stuff like that. Quote, "Ultimately, it was his money. We tried to direct him for long-term planning." One woman whose business Abraham invested in, and again, was a woman he didn't really know, was named Angela Moore. She had actually been introduced to Abraham by someone in his entourage, and she said that she met Abraham at a bowling alley. And it is while they were there, they're talking, and she talked about how she wanted to open a group home. Abraham offered to give her $40,000 to start it, but she said she didn't need that much. She just needed 20 grand. And Abraham went ahead and gave her the 20 grand, plus an additional $2,200 extra. Quote, "He didn't know me when he loaned me the money. I literally met him one day and met him at the bank the next day." Their agreement was that she would begin repayment on the loan exactly 1 year from the day that Abraham gave it to her. And it seems that, like, yeah, she was, like, making payments and was repaying back from what I could gather. Abraham also bought a $125,000 home he only saw once in Lake Wales, and then rented it out to a family that he only met once. And I don't know what he rented it for, but like I can imagine that he probably rented it for less than it's worth. He gave his nephew's best friend $40,000, gave his mother $12,000. I read another report that he gave a sister $10,000, and this specifically said sister, not stepsister, so not too sure. Couldn't find like a whole lot of nitty-gritty information on like Abraham's like family background and stuff. But the point that I'm trying to get at is Abraham was very, very generous with his winnings. You know what I mean? He really wanted to pay it forward. You know, he gave his family money. He gave people he didn't even know money. And he, you know, like I said, he gave homeless people money. Like he was definitely, you know, not Ebenezer Scrooge. He was not. Right? Apparently, he would write Wachovia cashier's checks to family and friends. And I think the Community Bank of Florida, I'm guessing that's probably where the, like, more business-type transactions probably went down, like the business loans. And I know for some people's mortgages, he paid off outright. And then other mortgages he paid off, but they were supposed to repay him back. Abraham also helped lots of families from his old neighborhood bury loved ones who otherwise they wouldn't have been able to even like bury them. Because everything has to be for profit, even your death. It said that Abraham also helped a lot of food insecure families like keep food on their tables, stock their pantries. Like he was really generous, you know. Quote, "If I don't be able to enjoy my money, my dream has already come true, to get rich. If I go broke tomorrow, I'm still going to be happy because money doesn't make a man." His good friend, Greg Massey, said that Abraham, right, even before the lottery win, was never a self-centered person. Quote, "It wasn't about the money with him, and it wasn't about him being selfish." Now, according to Abraham's family, there was a woman who was sort of like acting as like Abraham's like bookkeeper, and she had this like blue notebook, and she would keep a log of like all the money Abraham lent out, and I'm gonna assume probably also kept track of the money that he just gave away. So yeah, right? Like it was very clear that Abraham spent most of his money on other people, not himself. In fact, several months after his lottery win, apart from his house, Abraham's only other major purchases for himself was a 2009 BMW 750i. It is said that's where he kept the logbook of like the money transactions. Although, okay, so I also read that he didn't have a license. So how was he able to buy a BMW? Because you have to have a license to buy a car, right? I was super confused on some of those reports. So I don't know, maybe Maybe he got a license and then, like, didn't renew it or something. I just thought that was really weird. But yeah, anyway, going back to it. Other than his house, he got that 2009 BMW, a 2006 Ford F-150 truck, a Nissan Altima, and a Rolex that he got from a pawn shop. Those were pretty much the only major purchases that Abraham made for himself after his lottery win. It is said Abraham would just spend all night just kind of cruising streets of his neighborhood and hanging out, sleeping late, wake up late. He loved to have boiled eggs, pancakes, and pork chops from either Denny's or IHOP. IHOP. Goodness. And he loved just hanging out his house, watching shows like CSI and The First 48, because, quote, the bad guys were always caught. Abraham did keep some of his old habits, though, and that included hanging out at his local haunt, the Super Choice Foods Market. Childhood friend Eddie Dixon also spent time with Abraham at the market before and after his lottery win. Quote, he liked to look at women, saying that Abraham certainly dated a lot of women after his lottery win. Like, apparently Abraham was always sort of, kind of a lover of the ladies, as it were, and he would go to Super Choice Foods, just kind of, check all the ladies out. But of course, after his lottery win, right, he got a lot more female attention than he did before. There were even rumors that Abraham spent $10,000 on a lap dance. Yeah, definitely liked the ladies, maybe a little too much. And apparently, a lot of the women who met him at the bank to get money from him were women. Greg said that Abraham definitely had a weakness for women and would give them whatever they wanted. Abraham met a woman named Darlene, and she quickly moved into his house, but she quickly moved out. And around the same time she moved out, Abraham met and started dating 21-year-old Centauria Tori Butler, whose last name, by the way, Abraham didn't even know. Quote, I wouldn't know that. We wasn't too long together. Tori said that she was at a bar one night with friends when one of them asked her, quote, my cousin's a millionaire. Would you like to meet him? Yeah, not a fan of this age gap or power dynamic, but I digress. We'll move on. Tori said her and Abraham did have really good times in the beginning. They flew overnight to New York, specifically New York City, I believe. It was the first time either of them had been on a plane. And Tori said that Abraham enjoyed it so much that a week later, they flew back to New York and spent 2 days there. Quote, he gave me everything I needed. They even went on a cruise to Jamaica together. And it is said that Abraham, he just said that he, definitely spoiled her, his weakness for women. But even though, he lavished, Tori and, women in general and others around him with a bunch of stuff, Abraham was still, kind of frugal when it came to himself. He wouldn't even really buy himself, new clothes or anything. Tori said that his daily attire was high-water pants and Reeboks. And other than the Rolex watch that, remember, Abraham got from a pawn shop, so likely even, kind of underpaid for it, maybe, the only other prized possession that Abraham had was his Canon camera. He loved to take pictures. However, right, so we've talked a lot about Abraham's positive qualities, right? He's very generous with his money, right? Taking care of strangers, people from the neighborhood and all that. And, he might have been a really, a good friend or a good guy, but a good boyfriend, he was not. Abraham was a, philanderer. He was a serial cheater. And this was despite, right, even, not just having this, young, beautiful woman, like Tori, right? She even got breast enhancement surgery for Abraham because he was enthused with the idea. Yeah, so he may have been, a good friend, but was definitely a shitty partner, right, in that sense. And, don't get me wrong, it was the women coming to Abraham, right? Quote, women would go to the extreme to throw themselves at him. This girl followed us from Club Kathleen to Denny's waving a napkin with her number on it. Even his male friends helped him find girls. People just took advantage of him, knowing that he didn't get that type of attention. This was according to Tori. And while I get that, right, totally hear what she's saying, at the same time, he is a grown-ass man and a grown-ass adult, and he could always say no. So yeah, not the best partner. Now, Abraham and Tori would end up having a child together. It'd be Abraham's second son, Jeremiah Shakespeare. However, it didn't take too long, not too long, for Abraham to quickly see the downsides of not just being super wealthy and like everybody knowing it, but having a limited understanding of finances, let alone managing millions of dollars. Quote, I asked him, Shakespeare, how many zeros are in 1,000? He said 2. And this was according to a retired educator named Annie Phil? I wasn't quite sure how to pronounce her last name. Phyall. But anyway, she was a former educator, and she tried teaching Abraham. She even tried to introduce him to a financial advisor. Quote, I guess he thought he wasn't intelligent enough to understand what they were going to say. Abraham also met with a businessman named George Tinsley. He owned like a KFC franchise and like some restaurants in the Miami International Airport. And I don't know how this meeting happened, but he did have a meeting with Abraham where he was like giving this presentation, right, to Abraham about like, yeah, how to invest his money, like manage it, have it like make him more money, and all that. But apparently during his whole 30-minute presentation, the only thing Abraham really wanted to know was where George got his suits. Quote, it was too much for him to handle, and this is what he said of the advice that he tried to give Abraham. Quote, he was a good, trusting guy, and that opened the door for the inevitable. His demeanor and what he was about led to his undoing, which we unfortunately will get into. Abraham's mother, Elizabeth, even tried to encourage her son to take, like, reading classes, like, educate himself more. And other relatives of his even tried to introduce him to the then Lakeland mayor, Gow Fields. He also owned an insurance business to, talk with these people, right, who knew about managing this much money. Quote, they made several attempts to have him talk to me. He didn't have a sophisticated money management system to make sure he received the payments and interest he was due. Yeah, and it kind of brings up a point, like, I feel like we've been joking about it, God, since I was in elementary school, about like, oh, why don't they teach you the stuff that you really need, Because it's by design, kids, by design. Why basic financial education isn't like a core standard practice of K through 12 education here in America, I don't know. But it wasn't just the money management side. It was people trying to take advantage. He had an ex-girlfriend sue him for $5,000, claiming that, like, Abraham gave her a truck and then took it back or something. I'm not sure what happened with that. Another woman stole 2 checks from his BMW and then tried to cash them at, like, some check cashing place. And, you guys, I couldn't believe it when I read this. On top of all of that other nonsense, Michael L. Ford, the truck driver that Abraham drove with, tried to sue Abraham. Michael tried to say that he actually bought the winning lottery ticket and Abraham had stolen it from him. Just you wait. The audacity of this little bitch. In May 2007, Michael filed a lawsuit in circuit court in Polk County, saying that after he bought the lottery tickets, he put them in his wallet, placed his wallet in an overhead compartment in his truck, and later, when he wasn't looking, Abraham stole them. He claimed that he didn't even notice that his tickets were gone until 2 days later, when he opened his wallet and they were gone, and he figured that he'd just lost them. However, Michael said that when his boss told him on November 18th that Abraham had won the lottery, that's when Michael knew that Abraham had stolen his lottery tickets. Now, Michael claimed that he confronted Abraham about this. Allegedly, Abraham admitted that he did steal it, but there was no way Michael could prove it, so he could, F off. And that is when Michael went to attorney Jim Kelly. Jim Kelly then asked a fellow attorney, Michael Laredo, to then investigate Michael's allegations. And, of course, Laredo found the convenience store footage of Michael buying the lottery tickets, remember, for Abraham, and that seemed to be what they were basing their lawsuit on. They thought that was their proof. Quote, outright theft is what it seems like. The worst part is, Mr. Shakespeare admits our client bought the tickets, but he's got to admit that because there's a video. People are the worst. So they'd actually filed the suit in Polk County on April 24th of that same year, 2007. But Laredo told the press that they hadn't served Abraham with the lawsuit yet because he refused to answer his door. Laredo then claimed that Abraham called up Michael on May 1st and told him that he was really worried about this lawsuit and he just wanted to settle it. Quote, "My client hung up on him. There's probably going to be no resolution other than him turning over everything he's got." He said his first goal was to get a judge to issue an injunction, to freeze all of Abraham's assets and money. And I think by the end of May, realizing that Michael was totally serious about this, Abraham hired a pretty well-known attorney in the area, Willie E. Gary. He was from the Gary Legal Group in Miami, and apparently he had one of those reputations of defending the small man against the big, the big bad corporations or rich people or whatever. Apparently he had that kind of reputation. Gary countered Laredo and Kelly's lawsuit with his own $100 million defamation suit on May 21st. And in their suit, Abraham was saying that Michael had tried to extort $1 million from him. And when that didn't go the way that he wanted, he had resorted to suing him. Quote, "Mr. Shakespeare's livid. He's upset. Really, really, really pissed off about it." And this was, of course, according to Gary. Yeah, I would too. Just wait. So Abraham said in his suit that 2 days after he found out he won the lottery, Michael came to his home and demanded, not asked, demanded $1 million. Quote, "That guy used to be a real good friend of mine." And Abraham said that he had no problem giving Michael money, but he wasn't going to give him that much. Quote, "If he only waited, I could have given him $250,000 easy." But apparently, I don't know, I guess that wasn't enough for greedy little Michael. So a few days after that, Michael called up Abraham and told him that if he didn't give him the $1 million that he wanted, he was going to sue him. And that's what this a-hole did. Gary went on pointing out how Abraham had not went out and blown through all of his money or anything like that, and started listing all the things he had done to help people, help the community, and all that. Quote, "He has not splurged. All of his money is intact. He's invested it in annuities, stocks, and bonds, and things of that nature." And so, because of these two huge discrepancies between these accounts, between Michael's account and Abraham's account, and no real way to prove it, it was going to have to go to court, which means court process, which means, lots of processes and motions, and it could drag on, And on July 16th, Polk County Circuit Court Judge Bruce Smith froze all of Abraham's assets and money. This would prevent Abraham from spending any of his money, selling any property, couldn't do anything with any of it until the lawsuit was settled. Now, reports state at this point in time when everything was frozen and stuff, Abraham still had about $12 million left, but that's what he started with. So yeah, some of the discrepancies of the money and how much he had left seems to vary a little bit, but that's just what the report stated, that at this point in time, everything's frozen. Abraham had about $12 million. Not sure if that's cash and assets combined, I'm gonna guess. And in one of his motions, Laredo claimed that some of Abraham's acquaintances had told him that Abraham had blown huge chunks of money, and he had blown it on stuff like drugs, a Lexus, a Ford truck, and paid off the lien of his mother's house. Quote, "It's a big victory for us because it gives us an indication that the judge believes we have a substantial likelihood of winning the case." And this is what Laredo said when Judge Smith froze everything. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means that all right, there's no way to prove either one of you, so we're gonna have to, take this to a jury and let them decide. What a jackass to think oh, this obviously means that we're gonna win. No, it doesn't. Now, a trial was set for October, but Laredo told the press that he was gonna file a motion for summary judgment. Quote, "I don't pretend to be omniscient, but as far as I'm concerned, the case is essentially over." So during the deposition, I don't know, do they have multiple depositions and stuff like this, or is it just one? But anyway, during a deposition, Michael admitted, get this, Michael admitted that Abraham had lent him money on more than one occasion, had helped him keep food on his family's table on more than one occasion, and just admitted that Abraham had helped him out in the past. And can you believe, no good deed, right? The balls on this a-hole, I swear to God. Abraham just said, quote, he knows the truth, I know the truth. Now, during, some of the depositions or whatever, Laredo tried to bring up all of Abraham's purchases with his money, including, like gifts and, being generous to people. And I guess at this point in time, Abraham had 3 different women living with him in his house. I don't know if it was like a relationship sexual thing or if he was just giving them a place to live. I couldn't really tell from reports, but he didn't even really know their last names or anything. And Laredo was trying to point to that as, somehow that Abraham stole from Michael? I don't understand. But Abraham just said, quote, I don't try to get to know nobody's last names, right? Saying that, he helped people to help people. Now, the trial would happen towards the end of October, and it would last a week. So I guess Laredo failed in trying to get summary judgment. Now, all throughout, Laredo and fellow attorney Arnold Levine, who I think argued the case with him, wouldn't be prosecuting, argued the case with him, brought up, Abraham's criminal background, his past. And apparently, Abraham freely and openly admitted all this. He's like, I'm not pretending that I was some innocent angel or whatever. Abraham was very upfront. Gary, alongside his son, Seku Gary, who was also arguing the case with his father, accused them of just piling dirt and trying to, assassinate Abraham's character and whatnot. And let's not pretend there was a little bit of racism there too, right? Gary also accused Michael, who at that point had moved from Zephyr Hills, Florida to somewhere in Georgia, of lying throughout the entire court process. And I think this was because at trial, Michael tried to deny everything that he said in his deposition. And it's wait, so you were committing perjury then or committing perjury now? Because right at a deposition, aren't you sworn in at a deposition? I'm happy to say I've never been involved in anything like that. Knock on wood. But yeah, if you have let me know. I thought, isn't there sort of a swearing in type thing? I don't know. 5 ex-co-workers of Michael and Abraham testified, and they testified that Michael initially told them that he bought the ticket for Abraham, and it was only later, after he had filed suit, that he changed his story. And I guess Abraham also brought with him to court a large garbage bag full of old lottery tickets, trying to prove, he's been playing the lottery for several years, I've been playing with the lottery several years, look at all these losing tickets I had, which I just thought that was funny. Not to mention, who keeps the old lottery tickets? Is that a thing? On Friday, October 19th, 2007, it took the jury an hour and 19 minutes to side with Abraham, and they did not believe he stole jack shit from Michael, because he didn't. Quote, it boiled down to a question of who was the jury going to believe. Ford denied making those statements, but they, the witnesses, didn't necessarily have a motive to lie, so it was difficult to overcome that. And this was according to Levine. Gary did agree with this assessment, though. Quote, those people would have had to commit perjury, and they didn't hardly know Abraham Shakespeare. The following Monday, on the 22nd, Abraham said that he was looking forward to just enjoying some peace, finally. Quote, I want to be able to turn the phone completely off and not have to worry about any phone calls. My goal is to be able to wake up in the morning, get a fishing pole, and go fish. Or go hunting. Or golfing. I ain't never golfed before. He said that he was still going to move forward with his $100 million defamation suit with Michael. I never could find out what happened with that. And I thought this was funny. When asked if he had learned anything from this experience, Abraham said, quote, when I pull up at a convenience store next time, buy my own lottery ticket. Yeah, can you believe that? Can you believe that? What a douchebag. Michael is a douchebag. So Abraham was able to go off into the sunset, right? And enjoy his money. Not so much. So friends said, right, after all of this was settled, right, and while it was going on, Abraham was getting pretty tired of, I couldn't help but imagine maybe he was a people pleaser, but he was getting really tired of all of the hangers-on, the strangers, the leeches, always clamoring for money, right? It gets to a point where you start kind of getting tired of it, right? Quote, his life was miserable. He couldn't say no. He didn't get any peace. They didn't wait. They just came right after they found out he won this money, and this was according to Elizabeth. So apparently it was common knowledge around town. I'm not sure how big Lakeland is. If you know, let me know. Maybe like a tight community or something. But apparently it was common knowledge around town that people were tugging on him for like money and stuff. And Tori said that whenever her and Abraham were out, he was always recognized. Winning the lotto was, quote, was like being in the limelight in a small town. And they would, come up to Abraham and tell them like their sad story. They were facing eviction. They couldn't feed their kids or clothe their kids. And Abraham would just give them money, no questions. Quote, he thought with his heart, not his head. And this is, what Tori said. And yeah, like, that's the thing, right? So if Lakeland is kind of like a tighter community at that, like what I'm imagining, and it was, common knowledge, surely people knew, right? Like that he was Abraham Shakespeare, the lottery winner. And, they're going to know that he has a good-natured, he's given money away to people, to strangers. Like, what do you think that's going to attract, right? It's going to attract fucking scammers and losers and trash. And quite frankly, like, let's keep it real. Who knows, like, as time went on, who knows how many of those sob stories that Abraham heard were even real? Who knows? Tori said that even state inmates, that Abraham had never even met would write to him asking for money. And Tori, of course, would have to read these letters to Abraham. She remembered this one letter from this, one rando inmate asking for $1,000. Quote, we just laughed. What is he going to do with $1,000 in jail? But she did say that Abraham sent the guy $50. Tori's brother, Jeremy Reed, said one time he was hanging out with Abraham, and in a 30-minute span, Abraham got 8 phone calls, and every single one was asking him for money. Tori said, quote, he needed to feel wanted, but at the same time, he didn't want people to be around him just for his money. Abraham's childhood friend, who it was described that they were sort of like brothers. They're very close, grew up together. His name was Robert Earl Brown. And he would later say that Abraham would often lament to him how much he regretted buying that lottery ticket that day. Quote, I'd have been better off broke. He said that to me all the time. Samuel Jones had known Abraham since they were 12, and he said, quote, he really didn't understand it at all. It was moving so fast. It changed his life in a bad way, saying that there were always people outside, Elizabeth's house clamoring for money. And I'm guessing that's probably because, right, we said it earlier, Abraham lived in a gated community. And Elizabeth still lived in her home that she had raised her boys in. Samuel said that Abraham often spoke about getting out of Lakeland altogether and would often tell him, quote, I thought all these people were my friends, but then I realized all they want is just money. And remember, just because Abraham had money didn't mean, profiling didn't stop and whatnot. So in 2007 alone, Abraham was stopped 5 separate times by the police, and it was for various things, such as, driving without a license, not wearing a seatbelt, and he was even sent to the Polk County Jail twice for these infractions. And I know you're probably thinking like, well, yeah, I mean, you just said he didn't have a license and he was driving and he didn't have a seatbelt, and yes, absolutely. However, I would like to ask, out of all the times you've, done something you weren't supposed to, how many times have you, been pulled over, right? First of all, the driving without a license, how would a cop know that right off the bat, I guess if it's a smaller community and they knew of Abraham, I don't know, I just thought that was weird because, I can't remember the last time I was stopped by a cop. So it just got me thinking, I wonder if it was, was it profiling or what? Or did Abraham just have a reputation? In September 2008, Abraham's LLC that we talked about was dissolved. And Lewis, remember that was the attorney that Abraham had set it up with, would later say, quote, I represented Abraham early on and tried to get his affairs organized. When it became apparent that he was more interested in taking the advice of those in his entourage than mine, I ended the representation. Abraham was a good-hearted man, and it is a tragedy what happened to him, which we unfortunately will get to. So after living together for a year and a half, Abraham and Tori would end up breaking up. I believe they broke up around the time Tori gave birth to Jeremiah. Tori said that their relationship was pretty rocky. They always had arguments, but they never devolved into physical assaults from what I could gather. I never saw her say anything about that. But she said most of their arguments were, about Abraham's cheating. But she said these arguments, despite what they were about, they would happen and then they would reconcile pretty quickly. Quote, "Give us 10 minutes and we're eating breakfast again." She said that she didn't really want a large trust fund for her son. She just wanted Abraham to provide for him. And I guess at some point in time, we'll get a little bit more into this later, but at some point in time, Abraham started kind of backing off, supporting Jeremiah, and he started questioning the paternity of him. Yeah. We'll get more on that later. But Tori would end up having to go to court to file a petition for child support. And then that usually comes with a paternity test, right? Now, in November 2008, Barbara Jackson attended an annual small business conference. It was located in Kissimmee, Florida. And you're probably wondering, okay, who the hell is this Barbara Jackson chick? Well, Barbara Jackson was the real estate agent who sold Abraham his home. And it is at this conference where Barbara would meet a woman by the name of DeeDee Moore. Quote, "When I met her, she was in a wheelchair. She wheeled up right beside me. DeeDee told everyone that she had been involved in a really bad car accident, and DeeDee would end up being part of the small group of people Barbara sort of conversed with at the conference. She told this group about Abraham, who he was, and how he had changed her views on money. Quote, "It's not about money at all. It's about helping people." After hearing about Abraham's story, DeeDee told Barbara that she was a writer. And she wanted to write about her and Abraham, maybe even a book. And so, Barbara then set up a meeting between herself, Abraham, and DeeDee less than 2 weeks later. Quote, "When she came to the house, she jumped out of the Hummer walking, and she was on heels. She said she healed herself through scuba therapy. It wasn't even 2 weeks. Do y'all see where this is going? Now, not long after this initial meeting, not long at all, guys, don't know the exact date, but very soon after this first meeting, DeeDee would end up becoming a financial advisor of sorts for Abraham. She said that she saw how he was being taken advantage of by those around him, and she wanted to help him out. So, since we said, right, Abraham could barely read or write, like I said, Tori had to read letters to him, it was said that Abraham really, really relied on his inner circle to advise him and tell him, his financial status and whatnot. Yeah, not a good recipe. And of course, right, this, ensures that he's gonna be taken advantage of. And that's when DeeDee came in. She told Abraham that she could sort out all of his finances and protect his remaining assets. And we still don't really know, for whatever reason, Abraham trusted her, man. He trusted her. He trusted her, listened to her, yeah. And yeah, no one really knows why he trusted her so much. I don't know. But yeah, Abraham trusted her implicitly. It was really weird. And so, of course, right, with DeeDee stepping in to take care of his finances, that means that she took control of his blue log book. Remember that they were keeping track of his money going in and out? Yeah, DeeDee took that. Now, it is said, all right, by the time Abraham had met DeeDee, he had about $1 million left in cash and $3 million worth of assets, and that's all he had left. And this was due in large part to being taken advantage of, giving money away, not collecting on money that was owed to him. That seemed to be what his financial state was when DeeDee stepped in. And so right initially, right, Elizabeth is like, oh my God, this woman's, a godsend. She's going to help my son. Quote, "I looked at her as someone who was trying to help Abraham because she looked professional." And now let's dig a little bit more into this professional DeeDee Moore. Y'all, when I say this is a wild ride, because this woman... Let's just get into it. So, Doris DeeDee Donegan was born on July 25th, 1972 in Riverview, Florida. Her parents were Patrick and Linda Donegan, and Linda was a certified nursing assistant. And Linda would describe her daughter as, she was a very gleeful, happy child. She was a brownie and then a Girl Scout. She was a cheerleader at her elementary school and just seemed to kind of be, like your average happy-go-lucky child. DeeDee also joined the Missionettes. It was a group of girls from her church. They would get together to, do Bible study and stuff. And they went to church twice a week week on Wednesdays and Sundays. Now, when DeeDee was 7 years old, the family moved from their home on Happy Acres Lane in Riverview to a more rural home on Turkey Creek Road in Plant City. And Linda said that it was when her daughter was in Plant City High School that she started to become more self-conscious about the family's lack of money. Quote, when we would drop her off at her friends' houses, she would make us park a block away. She was embarrassed by our cars. We didn't have much money. This was according to her mother. Now, apparently, when DeeDee was I think she was still in high school or about to wrap up or something, she followed in her mother's footsteps and became a certified nursing assistant. She received her certification on August 12th, 1991. Now, it is said DeeDee was a good nursing assistant. She was very good to the people around her, very good to her patients, gave people money and food, and it is said that she paid special attention to developmentally disabled children. Quote, she was so good to those people. It is also around this same time that DeeDee began dating who would become her future husband, James Moore. He lived with his family a few miles away on South Forbes Road, and it is said that he owned his own fill dirt company. And DeeDee and James would end up married on May 1st, 1992. Now, Linda would never say much about her son-in-law. She just commented that after DeeDee was married, her family rarely saw her after that. Now, DeeDee and James would end up having a son together, Robert James R.J. Moore, and he was born sometime in 1995. And now let's get into the inexplicable life of DeeDee Moore, all right? So it seems, from what I could gather, from what was available, publicly without, requesting documents and such, is that DeeDee's first brush with law enforcement would happen in 1999. And this is when she was arrested in Polk County for shoplifting. Adjudication was withheld, where the, judge, arbiter, or whatever, reviews the, evidence and arguments and stuff. Yeah, that was withheld, not sure. Maybe the charges were dropped. And then, not too long after that, right, in the first half of 2001, she was arrested for writing a bad check. Wait until you hear who she wrote a bad check to. The Hillsborough County Tax Collector's Office. Yeah, it was for $418.60, and yeah, she wrote them a bad check. She was sentenced to a year probation. She had to pay $498.60 in restitution, and $100 in court fees. Which, by the way, don't you love in this country where it's okay, we're penalizing you because you don't have the money, and we're gonna penalize you by charging you more money you don't have. Now, I'm not too sure, what led up to this, guys. Not too sure. But we do know that in 2001, DeeDee's debts were piling up. So yeah, I don't know what exactly she was doing or where James is in all this. Not sure. There's some personal details that I just couldn't find anything on. But in 2001, it seems DeeDee was she was struggling a little bit. She had some debts that were mounting. It said that she had a brand new $36,000 Lincoln Navigator SUV. And I was a little confused because reports state that she owed about $46,000 on it. So I don't know if that was with interest and fees or whatnot. Other reports state that she had $6,500 in credit card debts and car payments. So I don't know. Yeah, some of the reports were kind of wonky with numbers. So that's why I'm just sharing everything that I came across. DeeDee also reportedly owed about $9,800 on a lease on a house that she rented in Dover. And yeah, I don't know where James is in all this. I don't know if they're separated at this point. I couldn't find anything about that. But on top of the debts around this time, DeeDee was also running a business selling prepaid Nextel cell phones. But at that time, she was the subject of a company fraud investigation, right? So yeah, things are not going well for DeeDee right now, right? 2001 is not a very good year for her. And on top of everything else, right? Her debts were mounting, and it was getting to the point where her SUV was going to be repossessed. On June 14th, 2001, she actually told a credit union representative, quote, "You're not taking my car. I'll do anything I have to keep it." And boy, howdy does she. So 6 days later, right, on June 20th, DeeDee drove her Lincoln Navigator to a parking garage. In this parking garage, right, she parked it, and then she met an accomplice. And this accomplice then tied her up and drove her to Wamama. And I don't know the specifics, but they, pretended to leave DeeDee tied up in a ditch, all right? And then her friend took off with her car. And so after the accomplice left, leaving DeeDee there, DeeDee then, tied up, flagged down the first vehicle that came by, right? So the people, of course, alerted authorities, and DeeDee told police that she had been carjacked at gunpoint by 3 men outside of an eastern Hillsborough County post office. She said the men forced her into her vehicle, bound her with electric tape, and kidnapped her. She said the men sexually assaulted her and then left her in a ditch near Fort Lonesome, which was about 20 miles south of Plant City. She gave very vivid descriptions of her attackers, down to their, clean-cut faces and their blue-green tattoos. But when police started kind of pushing her on the sexual assault, she just said, quote, "If I describe that, I'm going to start crying and throwing up again." But then she just went on regardless. Quote, "So anyways, they had, sex with me and it hurt." She submitted to an exam and even a polygraph examination, although the results of the polygraph would end up being inconclusive. And all of this because her fucking SUV was going to be repossessed, pretending to be sexually assaulted, and then why 3 Hispanic men? Are you also a racist? Now, I don't know the nitty-gritty details, but I do know within a couple of days, her story quickly came undone, and she would ultimately be convicted of insurance fraud and falsely reporting a crime, serving a whole year of probation, ordered to perform community service, pay restitution, and pay court costs. DeeDee would end up filing for bankruptcy in 2002, and in 2004, she would create a new company, American Medical Professionals, LLC, AMP. And this company would provide group homes, and senior care facilities with qualified nursing staff. Now, DeeDee told her mother that she was finally making good money with this company, about $200,000 a year. And it does seem that AMP was doing pretty well, at least at one point in time. So, as you can already guess, right? DeeDee's not the most reliable narrator, all right? She's a liar. So I think AMP was pretty successful. I believe so. Now, again, I don't know DeeDee's marital status. If her and James were separated at this point, I'm going to guess. All I know is that in 2006, DeeDee met and started dating unemployed 23-year-old Shar Krasnicki. I don't know if that's how you say his name. So, yeah, not sure about DeeDee and James. But DeeDee worked with Shar's mother and had met him, in 2006. And by January 2007, they were living together. Yeah, major ick, right? Shar said that DeeDee paid the rent, food, utilities, all that. He said he didn't have a job, but he did help manage the payroll at AMP. And he would also do, renovations and stuff around the business when it was needed. Quote, "She appeared to me to be successful financially." And as we know, DeeDee met Abraham in 2008. So yeah, this is the woman that has ingratiated herself to Abraham. In 2008, DeeDee hired a woman named Debbie Munguia? I hope I'm saying that right, one of those ways, to run the day-to-day operations of AMP. So I'm guessing it was legitimately successful. Now, AMP was actually run out of a rural home on State Road 60, and behind this home that was served as the AMP offices was a 2-story ranch home, and right next door to the AMP offices was an even larger brick home. And I believe DeeDee owned all these properties. Attorney D. Howard Stitzel III would end up renting an office, quote unquote, out of the AMP offices, and we're about to play 6 degrees of separation. All right, so we're gonna get into Howard met DeeDee. All right. and how he came to rent an office space in the AMP offices. And I did quotes just because it was run out of a house, so obviously he probably just rented out a room. So Howard had a son named Howard Bogan Stitzel IV, but he went by Bogan. And around Valentine's Day 2008, 13-year-old Bogan was at some, nighttime church event or something, and there he met fellow 13-year-old Kayla Gunn. And soon after this, the two began dating. Right? Quote, she was head over heels for him. He had a great personality, very creative, and funny to be around. And this was according to Kayla's mother, Shannon Gunn. So with their children, right, dating, as it were, as much as you can date at 13, right, Shannon came to know, right, Howard a little bit. Quote, it was my daughter's first boyfriend. You kind of want to know what kind of people these people are. So by early October of that year, though, Bogan and Kayla had broken up, but Shannon had still maintained a friendship with Howard. Quote, we got wrapped up in their family. I will never do that again. So a few weeks after her first breakup, right, Kayla went riding around with some friends in some golf carts. And this was in Walden Lakes, which was a gated community in Plant City. And Shannon said that when she went to pick her daughter up, there were two boys with her daughter and their friends. One of these boys was RJ Moore, DeeDee's son. So the next day, RJ and Kayla went to the Brandon ice skating rink. And afterwards, RJ invited Kayla and Shannon to his home in Walden Lakes. And there, Shannon met DeeDee. Quote, that's when I met DeeDee. She was very nice. So RJ and Kayla began dating. So of course, right, Shannon ended up spending some one-on-one quality time with DeeDee, usually watching movies or something. In December of 2008, Shannon said one time when they went over to DeeDee's, they were there for lunch, there was a black gentleman with dreadlocks there who she didn't know. Kayla said he was very nice and even sort of jokingly warned her about the energy drink she was chugging down. Quote, he was downloading music and watching me and said, girl, you better slow down. You could have a heart attack. Later on, after he had left, DeeDee told Shannon and Kayla that was Abraham Shakespeare, who had won the lottery and had been taken advantage of by a lot of people. So DeeDee was helping him out. She told Shannon that so many people were ripping him off. They wanted to see what legal ramifications they could do. And she asked Shannon if she happened to know a good attorney. Well, she did, and that's how she recommended Howard, and that's how he came to rent an office space of sorts in the AMP offices. Stitzel would also end up representing Abraham in his child support case with Tori in late 2008. And I believe Shannon and Kayla may have spent time with Abraham after that because I know Kayla babysat some of Abraham's nieces. I think a couple of times. Now, shortly after Shannon had introduced Howard to DeeDee, RJ broke up with Kayla. So Shannon and DeeDee's friendship sort of simmered off a little bit, but they would later rekindle things. Now, on January 9th, 2009, DeeDee acquired Abraham's house for $665,000. The $1.8 million two-story home that he had. Yeah, or rather, her company, AMP, did. And this was done through a quitclaim deed, and I guess Howard handled the sort of legal side of things. Although, interestingly enough, there was never any paperwork found or filed that could prove that DeeDee or AMP actually paid for the house. Later on, DeeDee would end up admitting that she paid nothing. And just hold, we'll fill in the holes, because you're probably wondering, what the hell? Hold. In early February of 2009, DeeDee helped Abraham establish another LLC. It was simply called Abraham Shakespeare LLC. A few days later, on February 9th, she became the primary manager of the LLC, and this included taking over all of Abraham's affairs and buying the debts that people owed to him. So this meant, right, that all of the money that was owed to Abraham, it was about $600,000 among 8 people, was now owed to DeeDee. Yeah, she owned the debt now. On February 11th, DeeDee and Abraham went down to a local Bank of America branch, where Doug Hancock helped them open an account for the LLC. Abraham had brought in a $1.1 million check from Prudential Annuities, and he deposited the whole check into that account. Doug said, though, later this same day, DeeDee showed back up to the bank, showed up to his office, but without Abraham. It was just DeeDee. And she requested that Doug let her know if Abraham tried to take money out of the account. A few days later, she also gave herself full signing authority over the LLC's account, and she did this by showing Bank of America the minutes from the LLC's last board meeting. A board meeting which DeeDee was the only attendant, and it is in this meeting that she gave herself full signing authority. And Doug remembers when he found out about this. Quote, "I was on the golf course when I was told that she had asked for a $250,000 cashier's check. The money disappeared very rapidly. On February 17th, Abraham was then removed as an authorized signer on the account. But of course, DeeDee was still one. And over the next several weeks, DeeDee would end up helping herself to about $1 million in that account. So pretty much all of it. She bought a truck and went on numerous lavish vacations, all with the money, with the company's finances, right, from the LLC's account. And she would later claim that these were all gifts from Abraham. She also transferred some money from the LLC account to her own accounts. Some accounts were held by AMP even. On February 13th, 2009, DeeDee and James officially divorced, so that's all the report stated. Officially divorced. So does that mean the divorce was finalized on this day? So I guess they were separated or whatnot? I couldn't find out any information about that. Now, at some point, not exactly sure when, but DeeDee made Shar the CEO of another LLC that she founded. Quote, "I just signed whatever she put in front of me," is what he would later say. On February 16th, Elizabeth got to see her son for her 68th birthday. Her CD player, I guess, was broken, so Abraham, the reports seemed different. Some reports stated that Abraham brought his over for her, so she could listen to music. Other reports stated that he bought her one for her birthday. But either way, came over with a CD player because she wanted to listen to Blind Boys of Alabama and other gospel music. Quote, "He didn't stay too long," is what Elizabeth would say. And she said she had trouble working it not long after her son left, and she hoped that he would come back to help her, work with it. But unfortunately, guys, this would be the last time Elizabeth would see her son, Abraham. So get this. So around this time in 2009, right, Abraham was still having to deal with lawyers and stuff. And that is because that douchebag, Michael, was appealing the fact that he lost that lawsuit. Yeah, can you believe that? He had been appealing this whole time, right? Like, litigation takes years, right? So because this asshole had dragged the appeals process through for like 2 years, Abraham ended up having to get an appellate attorney. His name was Jim Valenti. And he said by the time Abraham had come to him in 2009, he was just clearly over it. He said the very first time that he met with Abraham, there were 10 people in the room, and he didn't know who they were. Quote, "Advisors? Friends? I'm not sure who they all were." Now, it is said at this point in time, it's not exactly certain how much money Abraham had left, but Valenti did say that it was, quote, "sad." I'm not sure by whom, but I think he'd been taken advantage of. He was a man who was very weary by the time he got to me. I wonder if Abraham wouldn't say he would like to go back to the day before he won that money. The next court date scheduled for this appeal was to be on May 27th, 2009. But Abraham would end up not making this court date. To celebrate Valentine's Day on February 21st, DeeDee gifted Shar a $70,000 black 2008 Corvette. This was after already giving him a Rolex watch earlier in the year, I guess. I guess his plans for Valentine's Day was to show a handmade tree swing that he had made for her and take her to lunch. And DeeDee bought him a Corvette. On March 2nd, DeeDee bought herself a brand new 2009 Hummer. On March 12th of that year, Abraham drew up his will, leaving everything to his mother. Robert, remember his childhood friend, considered a brother, Robert, said that he wrote it up. Quote, "He wanted the will so our mama would be taken care of, but she didn't want it. She called it the devil's money." And it's because of that quote that some people or some articles misreported him as Abraham's actual brother. But Elizabeth came out and stated that they were just very, very close friends who grew up together. On April 3rd, 2009, Abraham hung out with Robert at his favorite local haunt, the Super Choice Food Mart. I guess they talked for about 2 hours, about a lot of stuff, life, death. being constantly hounded by people who refused to take no for an answer. Quote, he kept looking over his shoulder as we were talking. He said, bro, I gotta leave because they are out to get me. I don't feel comfortable. I feel someone is going to kill me. Abraham gave Robert $2,000 before he left. Robert said that he was going to go to the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino. Robert said that that's where he was going to go, and Abraham said, sounds cool, I will meet you there later. And then he took off. And this would end up being the last conversation Robert would have with his really good friend, Abraham. Quote, I was playing the slot machines till 4 a.m. I was supposed to meet him there, but he never showed up. This same day, a woman named Judith Higgins was given power of attorney over Shakespeare's affairs. Apparently, Judith worked for Abraham and helped collect the debts that people owed him. I don't know if he hired her, DeeDee did, not quite sure when she came into the picture. 3 days later, Judith had plans with DeeDee and Abraham herself. On April 6th, Judith was to meet up with DeeDee and Abraham at the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino. This was located in Tampa, by the way. But neither DeeDee nor Abraham showed up that night. Judith recalled receiving a very late/early morning phone call from DeeDee. It was a little past midnight on April 7th. DeeDee told Judith that Abraham had assaulted a woman, and that's why they hadn't shown up that night. April 6th would also be the very, very last day that there was any confirmed communication from Abraham from his phone. Now, Shar, DeeDee's boyfriend, he was not around at this time. He had left on a trip, I think it was across the state or something, to go see some friends. Now, over the next few days after April 6th, Elizabeth attempted to get a hold of her son. She left messages, called, and whatnot, but he never returned them, which was very odd. Quote, he would always call back. It might not be quick, but he would always get in touch with her, right? And so when days are passing and she can't get a hold of her son, something seems not right. And it wasn't long before Elizabeth started hearing weird stories and excuses as to where her son could be. I guess, again, I'm going to assume it's kind of a small, tight-knit community, right? So she was hearing talk. There were rumors that he was spotted in some city like Miami or Orlando. Other stories said that Abraham had finally had it and just took off into the sunset, never to be heard from again. And there were even weird rumors that Abraham was sick with AIDS in a hospital. And Elizabeth tried contacting hospitals. She contacted a Winter Haven hospital to see if her son was there, but had no luck. Meanwhile, as Elizabeth is trying to get a hold of her son during this time, DeeDee and Shar moved into Abraham's home. Now, DeeDee told Shar that she had bought all of Abraham's assets, including his house. Quote, she just simply stated he moved. And now for the rest of April 2009, DeeDee, using Abraham's phone, attempted to text various friends and relatives, parading around acting like Abraham. During this same month of April, DeeDee also called up her ex-husband, James. And she asked if he could dig a hole for her in her backyard. It was the backyard of that 2-story ranch house that was behind the AMP offices. And she wanted James to dig a hole with a backhoe that she said she got at an auction so that she could, hide chunks of concrete from some building inspector or something. Quote, she called me one afternoon, wanted me to come dig that hole. She told me she was going to put the concrete and stuff in it. I left. She called me back later that same day and asked me to come and fill it, and that's what I did. And this is what James would later say. He said when he came over to fill the hole later that night, DeeDee looked a little exhausted and out of breath. She had done some sort of vigorous physical work. He said that she looked, quote, sweaty, and that, quote, she looked like she had been working. He said by the time that she had called him to come fill up the hole that it was pretty dark, and he didn't see what was in the hole at all. He just filled it up. After this, DeeDee then hired a concrete pouring company to lay a concrete slab over the hole she had James dig and fill. In May, for Shar's birthday, DeeDee threw Shar a lavish birthday party in Abraham's house. Also during the same month, DeeDee transferred the building that AMP offices was run out of, that house. She transferred it to Shar's name. Or rather, what was reported was that Shar bought it, and right after this is when Stitzel, the attorney, moved in. Apparently, Stitzel also arranged for a lot of the transfer of Abraham's assets to DeeDee. Now, during the summer of 2009, DeeDee attempted to collect on some of those debts that was owed Abraham, and she told those who needed to pay him that Abraham was just laying low for a while, and she was taking care of collecting his debts for him. DeeDee even called Angela. Quote, "She was calling me as late as May. At that point, she said he didn't want to talk to anybody. He just wanted her to handle everything. It just didn't sound right. Why would she call me for money and offer to give me more money?" Yeah, I couldn't find any elaboration on that, but after we get through everything, you can probably infer what she was talking about. Now, from April to December of 2009, DeeDee continued using Abraham's cell phone to text and masquerade as Abraham to his relatives and friends. She also spent a lot of time with Elizabeth, taking her out to restaurants, taking her to theme parks like Busch Gardens, and the Holy Land Experience, and just took her out to just all sorts of outings. She even gifted her a sign for her wall with like an inspirational quote, "I will not worry." And all the while, right, DeeDee was assuring Elizabeth that Abraham was alive and well, just laying low, got tired of people asking him for money, and he just didn't want to deal with anyone right now. So as the summer, right, of 2009 closes, it's fall and whatnot, Abraham's family and his friends, like, they start getting kind of worried, right? Because, you know, there's text messages and, like, you know, written communication from Abraham, but none of them had actually seen him since earlier that year. And rumors were quickly circulating around Lakeland that Abraham, had just up and disappeared. DeeDee, though, she claimed that Abraham was alive and well, and she even told 3 different reporters from the Lakeland Ledger, was the local newspaper, that she could arrange an interview and meeting with Abraham and these reporters. But of course, that would never come to fruition. She told Elizabeth the same thing, and same thing, that never came to fruition either. On November 9th, 2009, Abraham's family, specifically his cousin named Cedric Edom, reported him missing, stating that none of his family had actually seen him since April of that year. When Lakeland police spoke with DeeDee, she described herself as a friend of Abraham's, as well as being a financial advisor to him, right? In what is believed to be possibly her very first or one of the first interviews with police on November 12th, she said Abraham wanted to be gone, and he was worried that his remaining money would be taken in child support. Quote, "He wants to be missing." She was interviewed by Polk County Sheriff Office detectives David Clark and David Wallace, and she suggested that they back off, you know, give Abraham room, and that he would resurface eventually. She also said that she bought Abraham's assets, including his house, at a, quote, "very good discount," that he took off, and he just wanted to be left alone. Quote, "I thought I was doing him a favor." Now, when asked for financial documentation of all these, you know, purchases and whatnot, DeeDee said that, well, she couldn't because she paid for everything in cash. That's why she got such a good discount. She changed her story several times, saying that Abraham was in hiding, that he was pretending to have AIDS, and that he was trying to avoid paying child support at any cost. Quote, "I'm telling you, he is not dead." Now, it seems to be, right, almost immediately DeeDee was on police's radar. Elizabeth even initially felt sorry for DeeDee, for the cops looking at her, but it became very apparent very quickly that DeeDee was hiding something. The story of Abraham's disappearance was run by the local papers, and in one article from the end of November, Elizabeth told reporters that she didn't really know what to think of her son's disappearance, and she didn't really know what to think of DeeDee at this point. Quote, "I feel like he would have called me or put something in the mail." Reporter Marissa Green was the one who covered the story for the Lakeland Ledger, and she said, quote, "As part of my investigation, I immediately took it to the streets, and one of Abraham's friends tells me there's this white woman that everybody knows, and she's been acting as Shakespeare's business partner." Now, apparently online sleuths on some, like, specific, I don't know, website were very quick, right, to pick up the story, and they were very quick to zero in on DeeDee being a suspect. They immediately, right, started looking her up, looking up records, business records and stuff like that, you know, and they quickly found out that AMP owned a lot of Abraham's assets, including his house, and they were able to dig up and see what else of Abraham's that DeeDee was in control of. Detective Clark stumbled across the site. Quote, I get on the internet and I come across this web sleuth forum. You have 10 or 15 people finding property purchase agreements, financial records. I questioned, how are they getting this information? I need a subpoena to get it, but they've got it. Detective Clark posted to the site, said who he was, and thanked them for their information and let them know that, yeah, what they were saying was definitely being heard. DeeDee would also post on the forum proclaiming her innocence and insisting that Abraham was alive. DeeDee would, of course, end up having multiple interviews with detectives where she always insisted he was alive. She just insisted that he just wanted to get away from it all, right? He was off somewhere. He didn't want to talk to anybody or deal with anybody, but he was still alive. Polk County Sheriff's Detective Christopher Lynn interviewed DeeDee on November 24th. He was investigating Abraham's finances and wanted to know about all of the real estate mortgages, personal loans, businesses, and LLCs that DeeDee had opened or started in late 2008, early 2009. She described herself as a successful businesswoman who ran AMP. She insisted that she only wanted to help Abraham collect on the debts that he was owed. And, she insisted that she just wanted to protect him from being taken advantage of. Quote, Abraham got taken advantage of by a lot of people. He let them take advantage of him, saying that Abraham did loan sharking. She maintained that if she was guilty of anything, it was trying to help Abraham protect his assets through this child support case. And she also claimed that she had paid Abraham loans of people that she knew would never pay him back. Quote, I did everything to help the man, saying that he wouldn't conduct credit checks and would just loan money to people and loan an amount that she knew that they would never be able to pay back. She maintained she had done nothing wrong. Quote, I told you I got nothing to hide. She repeated the story about paying cash for all of Abraham's assets. And she did offer to make a summary of how the transactions took place. But of course, she would never end up producing such a summary. And as I alluded to before, she would end up changing her story several times. And believe me, we will get into it. At one point, guys, oh my God. Okay, at one point, right? In one interview with Detective Clark, she attempted to sexually proposition him. Yeah. So he was interviewing her, and he warned her against lying to him, and that if she did that, that would make him angry. She told him he wouldn't get angry with her, but he would end up having sex with her. Quote, she said she was very attracted to me. He rejected her advantages, said that they weren't going to discuss anything like that. And in another separate interview at a different time, she tried to proposition him again. She was offering to get him a room at the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in Tampa and perform sexual favors on him. Yeah, can you, dude, we'll get into it. What do you do with people like this who just live in a total alternate reality? Just you wait. So by December 1st, right, with no leads, no evidence, no information, right, the Polk County Sheriff's Office offered a $5,000 reward for anyone with information that led to Abraham's whereabouts. Quote, we have absolutely no information to tell us that he's deceased, that he was the victim of a murder, but we have absolutely no information that tells us he's alive, and this was according to Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd. Now, family and friends, right, they told the press they had originally hoped that maybe he had just, hopped on a plane, flew off into the sunset, and was, in the Caribbean somewhere on the beach, right? Quote, I remember once talking with me over the phone, he said he might go to Jamaica, and this was according to Elizabeth. So with all this in mind, Sheriff Judd stated publicly, quote, if he's trying to lay low, just contact authorities. Let us confirm he's alive and well, then we won't tell his friends or family where he is if he doesn't want anyone to know where he's at. We're good with that. However, he did note in the same press conference that Abraham's abrupt disappearance was very worrisome. Quote, how many people disappear truly from their mom, from their child, from those that mean the most to them? It's not impossible, but it's exceptionally rare. We want information leading us to Abraham Shakespeare, dead or alive. Someone, somewhere, knows something. On December 5th, DeeDee sold her brand new Hummer for $49,000 in cash, and it was to the friend of an owner of a Chevrolet dealer, and she told them that she needed quick cash. In the second week of December, DeeDee called up the Lakeland Ledger, and of course, right, it was about Abraham's disappearance, right? It was like a pretty big local story, right? Lottery winner just disappears, right? So there was a lot of local reporting on this. And so DeeDee called them up, and of course they published what she told them. Now, DeeDee told them in this interview that she helped Abraham get away because he was again falling behind on child support payments. And this now included, right, baby Jeremiah, who was now like a year old. DeeDee mentioned how much younger Tori was than Abraham, though she didn't name her. And DeeDee said it was because of this and the fact that people kept hounding him for money that Abraham just wanted to get off the grid. Quote, he intentionally did not want to be found. He didn't care what it took. Abraham sold me his mess to get a better life. She claimed to have filed paperwork to take over 5 mortgages that totaled about $370,000 that was owed to Abraham. And she said after she took them, she sold them off to someone else at a loss. She even claimed that some of the people who owed Abraham money refused to pay, and she even felt threatened by some of them. She tearfully lamented to the paper how the police had searched her Hummer, her hard drive, had given her a lie detector test, and had even taken her blood. Quote, I'm not going to be O.J. Simpson and run, saying that she wanted Abraham to come back and help clear her name. Quote, I'm not scared of going to prison because there's no jury that will convict me. Okay. She also, to the paper, turned over a home movie that she had of Abraham. She claimed that had been taken earlier that year, and she said she recorded it in order to protect herself. So I guess in the video, Abraham's like scrolling images of his surveillance system, and, DeeDee's recording him, and she asks him if he ever gets tired of people asking him for money. Quote, they don't take no for an answer. She then asks him where he wants to go. Quote, it don't matter to me. I'm not a picky person. DeeDee then lists off a bunch of places, right, that he could go. And she asked him if he's going to miss his home. Now, apparently in the video, he seems kind of annoyed with her at this point, and he motions for her to turn off the camera as he answers, quote, I might miss it, but life goes on. Now, those closest to Abraham, though, they were like, I don't know, man, this version of events, it just doesn't really sound like Abraham at all. Quote, it would be amazing to me if he just up and left. Actually, at this point in time, he and Abraham were actually kind of estranged, and it was due to DeeDee's meddling. He tried to warn Abraham that he should be careful around her and that she couldn't be trusted. Quote, people are saying, how could he allow himself to be fooled by her? She's a very strong manipulator in tricking Abraham. He said that Abraham was not tired of people asking him for money. Quote, Abraham thrived on that. He went from a nobody to somebody of importance, in demand. I mean, I don't know about that, like maybe a little bit, but like I can see getting tired of it. Right. I feel like that's something that get real old real quick. So in addition, right, get this, in addition to contacting the papers and reporters, DeeDee also stayed in contact with police. Quote, at certain times, it was almost like on a daily basis, and this was according to Detective Wallace. She kept insisting to them that Abraham was alive and well. Quote, you guys are going to have egg on your face when you see he's alive, and I was telling the truth. She maintained Abraham was just hiding from everyone, that he was most likely in Miami or Orlando. And as the story ran, right, I had to include this, as the story ran for the next, few months or whatever, Laredo, remember? Michael's attorney, he commented to the press, and get a load what this jackass said. Quote, for my background investigation, he was always kind of a transient type. If it wasn't for his criminal record, he kind of didn't exist. Levine chimed in and said that he remembered Abraham as an angry guy whose gifts of money and whatnot came with strings attached. Quote, my sense was that some of his family members were unhappy with the amount of money he had parceled out to them. Were there people who were jealous? I would assume so. What a couple of jackasses. Not to mention, gee, I wonder why Abraham would be angry in your dealing with him. Maybe because you're representing an asshole of a liar? And that's not even commenting on the old angry black man trope, right? So an interesting interview happened in the Tampa Bay Times. It was in December of that same year. There was an article on Abraham's disappearance, and it talked about the ongoing legal battle with Michael and how he was still appealing it. And in it, right, they interviewed Eddie, right, one of Abraham's friends. And he told them, quote, only thing I know is that's my best friend. Y'all need to go ask that white woman where that man at. Referring, of course, to DeeDee. So in this article right here, it went into DeeDee's history. A lot of what we just went over mentioned that she was living in Abraham's home, and it was revealed that, right, her company owned his home along with a lot of his other assets. Now, at one point, I think it may have been in the month of December, not too sure, but DeeDee called up Tori, like, crying hysterically. Quote, I thought the lady was crazy. DeeDee offered Tori a $200,000 home if she would call up Elizabeth and tell her that she had spotted Abraham. Tori refused, and she would end up reporting this to the authorities. A few days after Christmas, on December 27th, DeeDee met Elizabeth for lunch at Cracker Barrel. And at this lunch, DeeDee had a man named Gregory Thomas Smith. Other articles said it was Gregory Todd Smith, to play Abraham on the phone to convince Elizabeth that he was alive and well. Oh, we haven't even gotten to the tip of the audacity iceberg. So who was this Gregory guy, right? Well, he was a barber, and he was one of the many people who owed Abraham money. Owed him about $63,000. He had known Abraham for 15 years, and he had borrowed the money from Abraham to pay a lien on his mother's property after she died. And he had actually been making regular payments to Abraham when all of a sudden, it was DeeDee who came up to collect the payments. Remember when we said DeeDee acquired Abraham's debts? Gregory's was one of those debts that now belonged to DeeDee. And now apparently, right, this call to Elizabeth that she had Gregory do, it was not the first time that DeeDee had him do something like this. She had paid him $300 to call a detective with a false reporting of Abraham at a strip club in Miami. She even told him to go to a payphone, right, and make the phone call and then wipe his prints from the phone. She also instructed Gregory to purchase a cell phone under the name Ronald Watson. She also told him to call her with it, text and leave messages to her phone as Ronald, so that there was history between her and Ronald. Now, unfortunately for DeeDee, Elizabeth did not for 1 second believe that Gregory was her son. And right after this, she phoned up detectives. And I don't know how, but they somehow used phone records to trace the call to Gregory. And on December 28th, they found him, put him on surveillance, and after they interviewed him, Gregory agreed to become an informant for them. He quickly began cooperating with them and agreed to record any and all conversations or interactions he had with DeeDee or anything related, right, to what we've been discussing. He would later testify that police did not threaten to arrest him and that he began cooperating because of his friendship with Abraham. Quote, I felt I owed it back to help Abraham. One time he even modified like a Red Bull can to like put the recording device in there. And yeah, because they would mainly meet up in cars, I think. I think they may have met up in other places, but I believe a lot of the conversations that would be recorded would be in vehicles. But yeah, I thought that was funny. He like rigged a Red Bull can to like hide the recorder, and there's DeeDee just talking right into it. Now, most of the conversations that Gregory and DeeDee had revolved mainly about how to keep stories about Abraham being alive, how to keep them circulating, right, in the neighborhood. DeeDee told Gregory that she needed his help in buying some time until Abraham decided to resurface. One conversation that Gregory recorded was actually with Judith. Yeah, Judith Higgins. The two of them were in a car, and they were discussing DeeDee's handling of Abraham's money. Quote, she immediately called me and said, you have to stall him. He can't go to the bank. This is what Judith told him. And he then asked her, quote, what was she stalling him for? It was some money she removed. It was a little bit of money for me, no more than $10,000, but she didn't want Abraham to know about the money. So by the end of 2009, beginning 2010, the investigation into Abraham's disappearance was really ramping up. And police, right, were constantly interviewing DeeDee, constantly trying to press her, right, for information. Gregory was also part of that, right? He warned DeeDee that Sheriff Grady was a, quote, beast, that she shouldn't take him lightly. Quote, you gotta watch him. On January 6th, DeeDee told Gregory to rent a room at the Comfort Inn and Suites on US 98 in Lakeland. When Gregory showed up to the room, of course, right, wired up, he said DeeDee was in a surgical cap and mask, and she had a computer that she had just purchased that day. And in the room, DeeDee and Gregory concocted a 2-page letter that they were trying to make it seem as if it was from Abraham. They were going to give it to Elizabeth, and it read, in part, quote, I'm grown and I don't have to come back, adding that he was scared that the cops were out for him for an assault charge that he had. Quote, I like being missing, just not being on the news. I've been through a lot, Mom. I trust Dee, but not with my address. She would tell the cops. She would not lie for me no matter how much I give her. It also instructed Elizabeth to tell Abraham's older son, Moses, quote, I will buy him a car and send money through the mail for what his mom has done for me. And towards the end, they wrote, quote, I don't want the cops to see this letter at all. I only wrote you just in case you're really worried. So, right, this whole process of them writing the letter was, of course, recorded, as was when they got into Gregory's car and drove to Elizabeth's mailbox and hand-delivered the letter. This same month, DeeDee also gave Amp to Debbie. And apparently Debbie had been begging DeeDee to do this for like over a year. DeeDee also allowed Debbie and her family to move into the house that AMP offices worked out of. And on January 11th, 2010, Debbie and her family moved into that home from their home located in Bonifay. Also during the same month of January 2010, DeeDee attempted to bribe one of Abraham's relatives. It was a cousin, Cedric Edom, the one that went to police, and she wanted to pay him to hand deliver a birthday card to Elizabeth. Inside was $100 and I think a cross necklace or something. And she wanted Cedric to tell Elizabeth that Abraham had given it to him to give to her. She gave him $5,000 to do this, and Cedric apparently did, do as DeeDee requested, although he reportedly did not tell Elizabeth that it came from her son. And I don't believe Elizabeth thought it was from Abraham either, so she called up police. They then in turn interviewed Cedric. He admitted to what DeeDee had paid him to do, and when DeeDee found out that Cedric was talking to the cops, she immediately contacted him, right? But she didn't know that their conversation was being recorded by police. In that phone call, DeeDee offered to give Cedric his house outright if he would call detectives and tell them he had personally met up with Abraham. And it was when he met up with him that he had given him the birthday card for his mother. And what DeeDee meant by giving his house outright, Cedric was one of the mortgages that, Abraham had paid off. And so he was one of the ones who owed Abraham money. And DeeDee said on this call, quote, I'll do what you asked me to do if you make all this go away. She even offered him bail money if he ended up being arrested for filing a false police report. She also said, quote, I wish I never met Abraham Shakespeare. Trust me, I wish I never got involved with him. This has ruined my entire life. Yeah, one thing you'll see with DeeDee is it's me, I. However, right, Cedric wasn't taking the bait, right? Like, the cops were right there listening. Of course he wasn't going to take the bait. Quote, the last time I seen my cousin was in April. Now, I'm not sure how long it was after this phone call, but detectives would end up speaking, right, with DeeDee about what she had said in this phone call. Detective Clark ended up interviewing her about it for about 2 hours, and he just said that, he marveled at the intricate way that DeeDee had tried to get this card delivered to Elizabeth. Quote, you're treating the signing of a birthday card like a fucking drug deal. What matters now is, where's Abraham? This ends the minute I see Abraham Shakespeare. On January 13th, Detective Clark called up DeeDee again, who once again insisted that Abraham had taken off. She said that he didn't want Tori to get any child support. Quote, he did not want her to have a dime. She described the chump change, the little bit Abraham had given to her compared to others. And she also insisted that Abraham had given her $1 million as an investment. Quote, I did a ton of work for him. When asked if she had performed $1 million worth of work for him, DeeDee admitted no. Like I said, dude, this woman, I think, is just fundamentally broken. And on this very same day, right, January 13th, Sheriff Judd came outright to the public in a press conference and stated that the police believed that Abraham was in fact dead. And they believed that he had been a victim of foul play. Quote, there are a lot of odd and bizarre circumstances in this case. We fear and are preparing for the worst. We're working this case as if it were a homicide. We sincerely hope that Abraham Shakespeare is a missing person, but we are preparing ourselves for the worst. We don't know his whereabouts at this time. Sheriff Judd said that the fact Abraham didn't call his mother for the holidays, that for him sealed it, that something was probably wrong with Abraham and he probably wasn't alive. Quote, I hope so much that he's alive somewhere, and I want people to know if they ever win the lottery, I hope they know how to handle the people that come after them. They can be dangerous, and this was according to Elizabeth. Judd came out and did identify DeeDee as a person of interest, but he refused to elaborate to the press, what made her a person of interest, what role she had played in Abraham's life. Like, he refused to elaborate on any of that. Sheriff Judd did let the public know about DeeDee's attempted bribe of Tori, remember, with the house. They told the public about the attempted birthday card delivery. They mentioned the lunch that DeeDee had with Elizabeth, where she had Gregory call her. They revealed that she had used Abraham's cell phone to mask around as him for most of 2009. And they divulged the fact that she'd given herself full authority over the LLC and all that stuff. All of that came out to the public on this day. Sheriff Judd stated outright, quote, DeeDee Moore is a con artist, and if she tried to sell me anything, I certainly wouldn't buy it. DeeDee Moore has cheated Abraham Shakespeare out of his money and possibly his life. It appears to us that she got his last dollars. From what we see, it appears that she finished wiping him out. He continued on. We certainly hope that the Confidence Act that DeeDee Moore is involved in to make it appear that Abraham Shakespeare has disappeared with money is correct, and he is alive and well. But our investigation doesn't lead us to believe that at this time. It leads us to believe that she pulled a con game on Shakespeare. She made the statement to us that she paid the $840,000 in cash. I'm sure the IRS is going to be interested in that, and we're going to make sure they know that she apparently had $840,000 in cash. Quite frankly, we don't see where she had $840,000. When reporters tried to get a hold of her right after this bombshell press conference, of course, all of DeeDee's lines were disconnected, and all methods of communication were completely cut. But she did have an attorney, Rusty Franklin, and even though he wouldn't comment on Sheriff Judd's specific comments on his client, he did comment on the handling of this whole case. Quote, it's unprecedented that an alleged pending homicide investigation would receive this much public comment by law enforcement. On January 19th, starting to feel the heat, DeeDee met up with Gregory, and there she lamented, quote, I've never been through nothing like this in my life, saying that they were going to have to write a book about all this when they were 80. On January 21st, DeeDee met up with Gregory, this time at Lakeside Village. Their conversation, of course, recorded. Now, in this conversation, right, because in all our conversations, DeeDee had not outright stated Abraham was dead. But in this conversation, Gregory, started pushing for this. And he told her that he believed Abraham was dead. Quote, I need you to be straight up with me now. This seems to be the very first time that DeeDee admits out loud that Abraham is dead. Though she claimed and would continue to claim that she never pulled the trigger. She told Gregory that a drug dealer from Miami named Ronald had shot Abraham in the shoulder in the middle of an argument and threatened her if she told anyone. Gregory then talked about getting someone to take the rap for Abraham's murder. If they could find someone, maybe who was going to go away for a long time, maybe we could pay someone off to take the rap, right? But to do that, Gregory said that he needed to know where Abraham's body was. DeeDee indicated that Abraham's body, it might be on her property in order to frame her. Gregory kept pressing her, offering to even move the body himself. Quote, you just need to show me where it's at. He suggested that he could dig the body up at night, and he started listing off all the supplies that he would need, including bleach, so that he could pour it in the hole to remove any trace DNA evidence of Abraham. He told her that once they moved the body, the fall guy, right, would tell the police where it was, and, they would find it. Quote, so if it's in Tampa Bay, so be it. When they drag it and they find it, he's already stuck with it because that's where they told him it's at. I don't think they will, but if they did go search, the sharks ate the body up anyway. Now, Gregory said that he did have a guy, all right? He had a guy that could take the rap for DeeDee. He was going away for 25 years for a drug charge, and he said his guy would cop to the murder for $50,000 and for covering his purchases in the prison canteen. Now, in actuality, right, of course, there was no fall guy. This fall guy was actually an undercover officer named Mike Smith. And Gregory commented how, this guy could, write a book about all this and be famous. And that's when DeeDee said, quote, I'm going to be making the book. I'm going on Oprah Winfrey with this one. Oprah. Dudes, we're really getting into it now. Just, this woman is completely unhinged. So later that day, right, DeeDee and Gregory met their fall guy, Mike Smith. It was at a local park, and, right, goes without saying that the conversation was recorded. However, it wasn't just recorded by Gregory and Officer Smith. It was also, unknowingly by them, recorded by DeeDee as well. So when they sat down, right, because they were at a local park, so when they sat down at one of the tables, DeeDee had put her purse on the table, quote, and opened it several times, but no one thought she would record the interview for any reason, so the purse was not searched. DeeDee told the undercover officer that she was a friend of Gregory's, and after like a quick oh, hi, how are you? She just launched right into it. Quote, I'm in over my head. I've never been through nothing like this in my life. She went into detail how drug dealers, particularly one named Ronald, had shot and killed Abraham. Quote, but I guarantee you that Ronald has killed him. I just know it because the man threatened to kill my son. She lamented how the detectives were trying to frame her, and it was because, she had just so happened to get Abraham's assets right before he went missing. So, right, Officer Smith agreed to take the blame, but he said that he needed to know how Abraham was killed and where the body was hidden. Quote, we can do this, but like I say, I'm gonna need a body. DeeDee said that she would contact Ronald to find out where it is. Smith reiterated that he wanted $50,000, but DeeDee wanted to know if she could make installment payments. Could she be on a payment plan? Quote, can I do it in payments? Because I don't have that cash. I'm going to have to sell something. Smith agreed, but he said he would need $10,000 cash as a down payment. She said that he could take a 2-bedroom house, but Smith just replied, quote, what do I need a house for? In the end, it was agreed that DeeDee would pay him $50,000, and she would be allowed to make monthly installments, and she told him that he'd be a legend for taking the heat. Quote, you're going to be in a book and probably on the Oprah show. On January 25th, in a car parked in the Lakeland Mall, DeeDee had another conversation with Gregory. DeeDee talked about wanting to cut a deal with prosecutors. So they, quote, can't touch any of my property, any of my assets, or any of my money if I tell them who I think has done something to Abraham. However, right, before they did that, they were going to have to dig up Abraham's body and then get Smith, right, to put his fingerprints on the murder weapon. That's what they were discussing. Now, DeeDee was pretty concerned about how to get into the hole because it was 6 feet deep, but Gregory told her not to worry. Quote, it's just like when we dug my mother's septic tank. All you got to do is do some steps in the wall to come out. But he did warn DeeDee that, they had to do this now because investigators were closing in. Quote, we don't have time for that, he told her, saying Abraham, quote, can come out today, tomorrow, tonight, this morning. He also told her that they were going to take the murder weapon, quote, to my damn house and gonna grind the serial numbers off, and we put his handprints on it and we put it somewhere. Later that day, they met up with Smith, and the conversation went into detail of how he was going to have to dig up Abraham's body and then, move it to a new location. DeeDee told him that she now knew where the location of Abraham's body was. It was on her property. It was, of course, buried in that hole that she had her ex-husband, right, dig and then fill. And then remember, she had it topped with concrete. She also told Smith that she had the murder weapon, that it was the weapon used to kill Abraham, although she never outright stated that she used it, right? She also told him that she did have a backhoe to dig up the hole, had a pickup truck to remove it, and would provide everything else that they would need. She ended up actually showing Officer Smith where Abraham's body was. She left tools near the gravesite, including bleach, garbage bags, gloves, tarp, an axe for cutting through, thick tree roots. She also provided them with a shovel and a diagram of where to dig, even placing a piece of metal on the concrete slab of where Abraham's body was. She also told them that the remains wouldn't have any shoes on, and that there would be remains of a white substance that she had spread on his body to help in the decomposing process. She also brought a cattle trough with her and told Officer Smith to put Abraham's remains in it, cover it with kerosene, and then light it on fire. She also handed over a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson. It was armed with a laser sight, and Smith assured her that he would file the serial numbers off of it, as well as put all of his prints all over it. DeeDee told him that he needed to use a screwdriver to open the battery compartment of the laser sight and make sure there were no fingerprints on the battery either. So on this very same day, right, where DeeDee's having all these meetups, Lakeland police officer Troy McKay Young, who had been an officer since 1990, was arrested and charged with unlawful compensation, which apparently was a felony, and misdemeanor use of confidential information. So, turns out, Officer McKay Young here sold law enforcement information to DeeDee. So apparently, right, he met DeeDee through a mutual acquaintance in August of 2009, and she told him that she was writing a book on Abraham, and she asked him if he could corroborate some information for her book. She wrote him a $200 check and paid for a round-trip plane ticket for his daughter to travel from Texas to Florida. And DeeDee on the check wrote law enforcement services as, the reason you write the check. So in exchange, Officer McKay Young gave DeeDee information about vehicle owners after she gave him tag numbers to look them up, and he used the right police database to get this information. It was reported that at one point she asked Officer McKay Young if one of the tags that she had given him belonged to a police officer. And it was reported, that this was actually DeeDee, trying to make it seem as if Abraham was alive. Or at least alive after the last confirmed sighting of him in April 2009, So McKay Young was booked into the Polk County Jail with a $5,500 bond. Although, get this, he had been on paid administrative leave since January 10th as they investigated. Quote, Troy did cooperate with the county's detectives. He obviously is innocent until proven guilty. This is not consistent in any way, shape, or form with the Troy Young that I've known for the last 15 years. And this was according to the Lakeland Police Department spokesman, Jack Gillen. Gotta love the boys club. Quote, this is not an indication of them, LPD. It's an indication of one person who made poor choices and poor decisions. And this was according to Sheriff Judd. Just a few rotten apples, right? No. Why don't you finish that saying? A few bad apples ruins the bunch. And of course, as soon as, Officer McKay Young was arrested, his leave became unpaid. Actually, kind of a shocker. And I am unclear if this happened this same Monday or Tuesday. Unclear, I think it was one of those days. But DeeDee visited Detective Clark in his office at the police department, and she went there to urge him to intensify his search for Abraham. Quote, I want this case to be over because I want my life back. It's ruined my life. Just find him. And so, after some back and forth, DeeDee insisted that Gregory knew where Abraham was. And that was when Detective Clark dropped the bombshell on DeeDee that Gregory was their informant, and every conversation she had had with him had been recorded. Quote, every phone call you've had with him, every meeting you've had with him, every one of those has been recorded. The gig is up, DeeDee. DeeDee, I guess, just replied with, okay, and then proceeded to go into a story about how Abraham had been killed in a drug deal gone wrong. And she said she was scared because she had witnessed it and, she had been threatened. And Detective Clark, of course, didn't believe a word of it. Quote, I want the truth. I want to know who shot him. This is your last chance for redemption. It's the bottom of the ninth and you have 2 strikes. And to this, DeeDee just sat back in her chair and replied with, quote, I'm going to go to jail for life for something I didn't do. I did not shoot him. The next day, on Tuesday, January 6th, 2010, Judith received an early morning call from DeeDee at 3:15 a.m. Quote, Abraham is dead, and she rambled on about drug dealers breaking into the house. She went on a story about a fight breaking out, and that in the end, Abraham ended up dead. She said the drug dealers wanted her to write a check for $200,000, and Abraham had held a gun to her head, and she told Judith that she passed out, and when she had come to, Abraham was already dead. Judith would later say that she went off on DeeDee for lying to her, lying to Elizabeth, for making them believe Abraham was alive this whole time. She would just say, quote, yes, I was mad. On Wednesday, January 27th, 2010, the press found out investigators, with the help of anthropology students from the University of Southern Florida, were searching an extremely rural 2-story ranch house on State Road 60. And the press found out that they were looking for Abraham's body at this property. Quote, at this time, Hillsborough Sheriff's detectives are removing concrete. There's a concrete slab, and we'll be searching under that slab to see if, in fact, a person is there. I would much rather find Abraham Shakespeare alive and well on his favorite Caribbean island sipping his favorite drink. Unfortunately, our investigation leads us to believe he may have met a sinister death by sinister means. And this was according to Sheriff Judd. And get this, after only moving in 2 weeks prior, poor Debbie and her family had to now move out. And they had to they were ordered to temporarily move out because, police had to dig behind that property. And I'm guessing because, all those properties were tied to DeeDee and AMP and stuff, they probably were just we gotta search the whole thing, right? And Debbie said that this killed her business, of course, and we'll get a little bit more into it, but up until this point, business was really good for her too. Poor Debbie. So that morning, police brought in heavy equipment to remove the 30-foot by 30-foot concrete slab that DeeDee had lain, or rather, had a company lay about 6 months prior, right? It was publicly revealed that the property was technically owned by DeeDee's boyfriend, Shar. Now we know why she transferred that into his name, right? And it was also reported that, Stitzel also had, an office in there. Stitzel told the press that he had only had dealings with DeeDee, had never even met Shar, and he himself had last seen Abraham in late 2008, early 2009. And on the same day, right, as investigators were digging up the concrete, other detectives went to interview Judith. She told them about DeeDee's bizarre phone call, but when they tried to push her on the subject of that conversation that she had with Gregory, remember about the 10 grand, all of a sudden she got real quiet and said, quote, "I can't remember." And that was in reference to what DeeDee had told her. Quote, "Let me think on it." By the next afternoon, Thursday, January 28th, investigators started focusing on a more isolated, smaller area. I think they had removed the concrete and they were now in the dirt, and they were focusing on a very specific area. And by that same Thursday evening, it was reported that police did in fact find a body there. Quote, "Our presumption is that it's going to be him," referring, of course, to Abraham. And this was according to Hillsborough County Sheriff David Gee. He did say investigators had to dig by hand so as not to destroy any evidence. And all he could tell the press at that moment was, quote, "I can tell you it's been here for some time." Abraham's body was found 5 feet underneath the concrete slab. I believe the concrete slab was 4 feet thick. It was wrapped in plastic, and then a blanket, and then a rug. And so at the site, right, as they're digging, some of Abraham's family and friends were watching. Quote, "I hate it happening to him." And this was a friend of one of Abraham's uncles named Arthur Green. Cynthia Johnson was one of Abraham's cousins. She was also there watching. And she said, at least maybe we can get some kind of closure for the family. Quote, "We can give him a proper burial if it is true." Tori said, quote, "He didn't deserve this." This same Thursday, detectives interviewed James, DeeDee's ex-husband. He admitted to what he had done for DeeDee, what we went over, and he said that he had never known or met Abraham, didn't know about him or anything. Quote, "I've never met the man. I've never seen the man. I never put no body in a hole." And by Friday, they were able to confirm that the body was that of Abraham, and they did that by matching his fingerprints. They also found that he died from being shot twice in the chest with a .38 caliber bullet from a Smith & Wesson gun. However, get this, the bullets recovered from his body were so deteriorated that they wouldn't be able to test them, and so they would never be able to 100% confirm what .38 Smith & Wesson killed him. So remember I said Debbie's business really suffered after this? Well, yeah, especially because, right, the house and the address, all that was blasted all over news. There was photos everywhere, helicopters and, right, news vans camping out. And yeah, poor Debbie's business really, really suffered. And I believe they were also saying that they believed Abraham may have been killed, actually shot, in either the house that had the AMP offices or the brick house next to it. So that was another thing, right? Quote, "Who wants to work at a murder scene? I can't wait to get out of here. I moved into a nightmare." She moved her family out ASAP, and yeah, poor Debbie, she lost clients and employees left and right. In interviews with detectives on January 29th and 30th, DeeDee just maintained her innocence. Quote, "You think I've done this. You think I took a gun and shot somebody. If you believe I did it, an innocent person is going to jail." Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office Greg Thomas told her that he was sick and tired of going round and round and round with her. He was tired of her constant changes of stories, was tired of her lies. Quote, "I'm not going to sit here and listen to more twists and turns. I'm not going to be led astray." She said 2 men had shot Abraham but left her alive, quote, "so I can get them more money." Detective Wallace was also in on this interview, and he straight up told her that, he didn't believe a word she was saying, especially when she had moved into Abraham's home so quickly. Quote, "You didn't live the life of someone who was scared." DeeDee then tried to put on her white woman tears. Quote, "So lock me up and I'll prove in court I didn't kill him." After a disturbing visit from their daughter on Sunday, January 31st, DeeDee's parents, Linda and Patrick Donegan, called up authorities on February 1st. They told police that their daughter kept coming up with different explanations as to what happened to Abraham and what resulted in his death. Quote, at first she was told 2 black people shot him. Then she told them, quote, they think RJ did this, referring to her son. She told her parents that she didn't kill Abraham and she never could. When police asked Patrick if his daughter had a habit of lying, he admitted that she, quote, fibbed quite a bit. In addition to the fake carjacking story, Patrick also told them about a fire that DeeDee supposedly had in her Plant City office. But the fire just happened to start after DeeDee had removed, everything she wanted out of the office that was, important, such as, I think a computer and a hard drive or something. Patrick told detectives that he couldn't believe his daughter could kill, move, and then bury Abraham's body on her own. Linda said that she phoned up detectives after their daughter was explaining things to them and things just weren't adding up. Linda said DeeDee told her, quote, Abraham was strangling her because I wouldn't take the amount of money out of the safe that he wanted to give these drug dealers. She claimed one of the drug dealers shot Abraham in the shoulder. Quote, then she said after they took his body out, this guy, Johnny, said, don't worry, he's still alive. I said, if he was still alive, why was he digging the hole? She said, well, then she went blank, like she's staring into space. So right then, I knew something was wrong, and I decided to call y'all today. She said she asked her daughter why she didn't go to the police. Quote, she said she feared for RJ's life, that he was going to get killed. Linda also turned over DeeDee's video camera to police. On Monday, February 1st, DeeDee did an interview with the Tampa Tribune, and she talked about how she met Abraham, how she came to manage his money, and to explain that concrete slab where his body had been found. So, sitting in the home she bought from him, in a 2-hour interview, she told the paper that she was anticipating being arrested. Quote, I didn't hurt Abraham in any way. She went over the story of how she met him, claimed to have had 8 chapters for her book already done. She claimed Abraham had blown through $11 million when they met. Quote, he had nothing left but $1 million in assets. I helped him with his finances. She insisted she had done nothing to Abraham. I didn't hurt him. I've talked to detectives. I am not going anywhere. I am not moving my stuff out of the house. I am not running. When asked about allegations that she had funneled about $2 million of Abraham's assets and money into her own accounts, she insisted, quote, everything I did as far as Abraham's money was done before Abraham went missing and done with his full acknowledgement and consent. She claimed that all his wealth had just become a burden on him. Quote, he enjoyed being around people, but having all this attention with people wanting to borrow money from him was too much. The lottery is more like a curse than a blessing. And now it is the same way in my life because of what is happening to me now. Me, I, poor DeeDee. She claimed the last time she saw Abraham was April of 2009, but she refused to go into specifics because of the ongoing investigation of the accusations of her texting, right? Parading around as Abraham, trying to bribe Tori and the others. DeeDee just said, quote, there are always 2 sides to every story. And she said, though she anticipated being arrested, she said, quote, no, I am not worried. I am innocent. I would never take another human's life. No amount of money in the world is worth that. She also tried to say that there were other killers who had murdered Abraham and that he had enemies, that there were at least 2 killers, and at least one of them knew Abraham. She said that she shared all this information with the police. Oh, and the concrete slab, she did admit that she did have a company pour concrete in April of 2009, but it was a skirt for her boat and camper that she had. She also claimed, guys, that it was her tip that led authorities to that property to begin with. Like I said, man, this woman lives on a different planet. She ended the interview with, quote, I just want justice brought. God above sees all. That is the person who has done this has to answer to. There was one thing that DeeDee was right about, though, and it was that she was arrested. She was actually arrested the day after her interview, Tuesday, February 2nd, and she was arrested for accessory after the fact on first-degree murder. Quote, I won't say we have identified all of the players involved. We're going to seek justice. And this was according to Sheriff Gee. Defense attorney John Ligori was assigned as DeeDee's attorney, and he said he wasn't surprised that his client was arrested given the recent developments in the case. But he stated that there could be other killers out there. Quote, DeeDee may be a valuable witness against anyone responsible for the actual murder of Abraham Shakespeare. Okay. Her bail was set at $1 million. And it is when, right, all of this is coming out that investigators came out and said that they believed Abraham had been killed April 6th or 7th, 2009. And they also stated that they believed he had been killed at a home located next to the property where his body had been found. So in the affidavit they released all that information about Gregory being an informant, although he wasn't named in the conversations. they had and what they talked about, right? Getting a fall guy and all that. That was all made public. Police also stated publicly that they believed Abraham died of homicidal violence, but they didn't elaborate to the public. Like, the public didn't know that he had died of 2 gunshot wounds to the chest. Elizabeth said that she did believe for a long time that her son was alive, but when he was a no-call, no-show for Thanksgiving and Christmas 2009, she finally had to accept that the stories she had been told about him being alive were just not true. She also stated at a news conference that the last time, right, she saw her son was for her birthday. Quote, I feel angry, I feel hurt, disappointed, and she outright stated that she believed DeeDee was responsible for her son's death. A friend of the family, Pastor H.B. Holmes, said DeeDee was a, quote, devil in disguise. He told the public about the AIDS rumor that DeeDee had started, and when all this was coming out, right, all of DeeDee's family and friends were shocked. Her former mother-in-law, Frances Moore, said that their whole family was in a state of shock. Quote, she was in our family for 16 years. Our family is upside down. It is mind-boggling. Her own mother, Linda, said of what her daughter did to Elizabeth, quote, it makes me sick. She took that woman around knowing her son was dead. Maybe DeeDee felt guilty. Linda said that RJ was having a hard time over his mother's arrest. Yeah. She said that she had taken him to the Orient Road jail to see her. DeeDee told her mother and RJ that she didn't kill Abraham and that she only covered up his murder because the real killers were threatening RJ. She also told her mother that if the police agreed to protect her son, she would divulge everything that she knew. Quote, that's what she told me. I don't know what to believe. I don't know what happened to DeeDee. She was a wonderful child. Yeah, man, can you imagine, like, doing everything right? Raising your kids, thinking everything's all kosher, and then this shit happens. Man, I can't imagine. On Saturday, February 6th, dozens of Abraham's family and friends held a proper funeral for him and a proper burial. It was held at the New Bethel AME Church, and the services included like a part dance, part mime dance that was supposed to like transition like death to the afterlife. None of his family themselves spoke, but a female mourner did read a poem penned by one of Abraham's brothers, and it read in part, quote, in these streets nothing is cheap. At all times we must watch our back, and if not, they'll lay us flat as a mat. On Monday, February 8th, Hillsborough and Polk County authorities searched the house that DeeDee had, let's keep it real, stole from Abraham. They searched for any and all documents related to how she had handled Abraham's finances, right? Any type of business or financial records, tax forms, computer programs dealing with Abraham, DeeDee, Shar, Stitzel, Judith, along with any paperwork related to buying that backhoe. They also searched for any records or paperwork pertaining to Shakespeare and Associates LLC, Abraham Shakespeare LLC, American Medical Professionals LLC, A Statin Supplies LLC, and American Professionals PEO Incorporated. So I guess what they were really looking for, was how DeeDee able to transfer $2 million in money and assets from Abraham's accounts to her own. And they were also looking for how she spent the money and looking for anyone who had helped her. They also searched for car titles, any documentation related to auto sales, any letters pertaining to Abraham, phone records, text message printouts, records pertaining to firearms training, firearms, ammunition, and they were looking for information on how exactly she had dug that hole. And so I was a little confused about that wording, because like they knew her ex-husband dug it for her, but maybe they were trying to, related to the backhoe, like other materials she would need or something. On February 12th, Debbie was finally able to move her and her family out of that house. Man, that would suck. Also at the same day, some of DeeDee's family was also at the properties cleaning stuff out. There was a woman at the property who called herself a friend of DeeDee, and she like proclaimed herself to like oversee everything that was going on. And she said that she was there because there were some things that were DeeDee's belongings that she had before she had even met Abraham. There was also things that belonged to RJ, and she wanted to make sure that they got him. Linda said that the family was going to try to sort everything out, and that anything DeeDee had acquired after she met Abraham was going to go directly back to his family. And this included new carpets, a stainless steel refrigerator, new windows, new wiring, and there were other home improvements that totaled like about $70,000 worth of home improvements. Quote, I am making a list of all the things DeeDee bought since she met Abraham. It will all go to his family, and this was according to her mother, Linda. On Friday, February 19th, DeeDee was formally charged with first-degree murder. In the 22-page arrest affidavit, Detective Thomas recounted, all of the many tales and versions of stories that DeeDee had told. First, it was the drug dealer named Ronald. Remember the name of the cell phone she wanted Gregory to buy? Then she blamed herself, saying that it was in self-defense. Then she shifted the blame to a cousin of Abraham's. And then at one point, guys, she had even tried to blame her own son, RJ. And she finally pointed the finger at Stitzel. Quote, Miss Moore has provided several accounts as to how Abraham Shakespeare was killed. In every account, Miss Moore has admitted being present when Abraham Shakespeare was killed. There is no credible evidence linking anyone other than DeeDee Moore to the homicide of Abraham Shakespeare. Right after DeeDee pointed the finger at his son, right, police of course had to interview him, and he, quote, 100% had nothing to do with it. Detectives also interviewed Shar, who also denied any involvement in Abraham's murder. He also took and passed a lie detector test as well. And this is also, I guess, when the public found out about Gregory, like he was named. They found out about the murder weapon, and I think there was more information divulged in this affidavit about her trying to hire someone to take the blame. Shannon and Kayla did an interview when all of this was breaking, and Shannon recounted how she had introduced Stitzel to DeeDee, and Kayla said that it was very disturbing to know that she had been in the home that Abraham was killed in. Quote, I was freaking out. I had been over to the house. It's weird. It scares me. I never want to go over there again. The next day, DeeDee was ordered held without bail, and during this same month, DeeDee filed paperwork requesting a public defender, saying that she only had $100 in her bank account. She was eventually assigned public defender Charles Trena. On Thursday, March 11th, a grand jury indicted DeeDee on first-degree murder. Authorities also charged her with illegal wiretapping for that meeting that she had recorded from her purse between, like, Gregory and her and Smith, although that was not part of the grand jury review. Hillsborough Circuit Court Judge Walter Heinrich granted the defense's request to reduce the bail on the wiretapping charge, or excuse me, on the accessory charge, because I guess prosecutors had failed to file, like, the formal paperwork or something. They had to file formal charges within 21 days as per state law, and they didn't. So the judge said that he could release her on her own recognizance on that charge. But since the real charge was the murder charge, she wasn't going anywhere. Why do they do stuff like that? It's so silly and weird. It's just like, wait, she's being held on first-degree murder. Like, who cares about all these other lesser charges? I don't know. Get this, though. On Monday, March 15th, the public defender's office bowed out of representing DeeDee. They said they had a, quote, ethical conflict. In response, Hillsborough County Circuit Court Judge Daniel H. Sleet appointed the Criminal Conflict and Civil Regional Counsel to defend her. I guess this was established in 2007 by the state legislature, and it was for situations just like this. It kind of reminded me of the Yule case, right? Where they had to, like, the public defender's office couldn't defend Joel. That's kind of what that reminded me of. Judge Sleet appointed Christopher Bolt to represent DeeDee. Now, public defender Julianne Holt wouldn't come out and state what this ethical conflict they had was, saying that the rules of professional conduct prohibited her office from saying that. Oh, come on. So due to this conflict, DeeDee's arraignment was delayed until May 10th. Robert was at this court hearing, and he told the press that other people would be arrested for stealing from Abraham. Quote, I want the rest of them to be locked up, but DeeDee needs to get the chair for what she did to my brother. On Saturday, March 20th, in a 4-page letter, postmarked March 17th, DeeDee wrote the Tampa Tribune, proclaiming her innocence. She titled it More Speaking Out, and she said her portrayal in the media was totally unfair. Quote, I have an impetuous notion to let my voice be heard because there's got to be a reason for this life-altering trauma happening to me. I inwardly chastise myself for opening up, so please don't criticize me. The picture you paint of me in the news, I would not want to hang around myself. You twist and alter one bad situation that happened in my life. You don't emphasize all the things I've done to make a difference in the world. I have helped people since I was 18 years old. I've paid people's light bills, house payments, phone bills, car payments, and etc. And then pleaded for the people who knew the real killer to come forward. Quote, God knows the truth. Let him be the judge. If you pray for me and I had something to do with it, God will punish me for that. I know it sounds crazy, but something compels me to speak out to him. Anyone who knows him, I beg of you to let him know how wrong this is. You know you are going to get caught. There's too much media. I know I did not have anything to do with Abraham's death, and God will not let me be convicted of anything. I did so much for so many people for my life to end this way. Abraham was good to me, and I did what he asked of me. I had no reason to hurt him. She went on also to complain how shitty the Orient Road jail was, saying it was, quote, not a nice place. She complained it was cold and that the food was bad. Quote, quote, "Jail is the worst place on earth ever to be. I sleep on concrete with a hard plastic mat. Some people go to jail that are really innocent, like all the people finding out their DNA does not match. No amount of money replaces their time spent in jail." She ended her letter by pleading for people to send her books. They were books for her and her inmates, so that she could, help and educate them. Quote, "They already have Bibles and love stories. They need learning books to help them improve their skills. How to improve your grammar, words you need to know, sign language, how to learn Spanish. New NIV Bibles, New International Version, to help them understand the Bible more, and any learning or skills or books." Yeah, I think it's safe to say that DeeDee is totally living in a completely different universe than the rest of us. Now, by April, DeeDee's attorney was Stephen B. Fisher. Not sure what happened there, but yeah, it was just kind of dropped into an article that was her attorney now. And he did state that there were more people involved in Abraham's death. And he claimed that his client wasn't the trigger man. Quote, "For my review of the probable cause affidavit and my investigator's review, I see plenty of room for further investigation to develop evidence that Miss Moore was not involved in the murder or not the primary person involved in the murder. It appears to me that there were other people involved in Shakespeare's murder. I think it is quite possible from the evidence I have seen that someone else pulled the trigger and did so without Miss Moore's knowledge." Elizabeth said that after DeeDee had been arrested, authorities did tell her that they expected more arrests to follow. All Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office Colonel Albert Frost would say is, quote, "We're plugging away. This is kind of a complicated case, and we are slowly digging. We are looking at all angles and not ruling out that possibility, but we are not going to comment on it." And, guys, get this. This same month, Elizabeth lost her cafeteria job at the college. Yeah, she had worked at the cafeteria at the Florida Southern College for 35 years. And I guess the college contracted with Guest Services Incorporated, and they are actually the company that, employed Elizabeth and the other cafeteria workers. And after 35 years, Elizabeth just got some piece of shit measly thank you letter in the mail and telling her that she was being retired. And it turns out the cafeteria had to let go all of its employees as part of a restructuring. Remember, people, companies do not care about you, so don't care about them. Yeah, 35 years with a company, and in this country, it's allowed to just cut them off. Don't have to provide anything. On June 30th, 2010, DeeDee made 5 phone calls to Debbie, from jail obviously. In one of the conversations, DeeDee told her that she had videotaped Abraham talking about, quote, leaving Lakeland and what he wanted done with his money. On August 4th, police obtained a warrant to view that data on that video camera that DeeDee's mother had given to them. They said in their search warrant application that they believed the video camera would reveal, quote, evidence of the personal relationship and financial transactions which led to the transfer of Mr. Shakespeare's wealth and his ultimate death. During the summer, a Lakeland attorney named Stephen Martin was hired to go after any assets that belonged to Abraham, to pay for the operation of his estate, and to set up trust funds for Moses and Jeremiah. On Thursday, September 16th, 2010, DeeDee called up the Tampa Tribune and once again proclaimed her innocence. She maintained that she was not there when Abraham was killed, and now claimed that she didn't even know that Abraham was dead until shortly before his body had been discovered. She also said she had so many different versions of what happened to Abraham because her life and her son's life were threatened. And she told the paper that she knew her story sounded outlandish. Quote, people will have a field day. They will be all judgmental. It is crazy, ludicrous, but the truth will set me free. I lied because I was scared. Now, the reason DeeDee called up the paper was to try and mitigate the damage from the publication of several court documents and affidavits and such. And this was after they had been turned over to the defense, right? So they are now made public. And this is when the public discovered that not even DeeDee's own parents believed her bull, and a bunch of other information about DeeDee came out. About 4,500 pages of documents were released. On November 10th, 2010, prosecutors announced that they would not seek the death penalty against DeeDee. This was at a hearing to schedule the release of additional information, aka discovery. Judge Sleet had given the attorneys 30 days to review the material and decide, like, what would be made public and what would not. At that hearing, however, Fisher stated that he still had a lot of documents to go through. And this included 61 CDs with mainly surveillance footage, recorded statements made by DeeDee and other witnesses, and several hundred pages of bank records. Judge Sleet then set a hearing for December 16th to finalize, like, all of this before this information would be made public. And there were many media outlets who were, like, very, like, aghast and against this delay in publicizing this information. On November 23rd, though, they did release 23 DVDs to the public, and it contained interviews with DeeDee's parents, associates, Abraham's family, his friends, crime scene photos, and surveillance photos of DeeDee purchasing the items required to dig up Abraham's body. Some of Gregory's recorded conversations, including that one he had with Judith, was also released at this time. In March of 2011, an article was done with Elizabeth. It was for the 1-year anniversary of Abraham's body's discovery. And it was pretty much her talking about how much she had struggled since her son's death. Quote, "Sometimes I be pretty nervous. It feels like life has ended for me. That's just the way I feel." She said in the article that she still waited for her son to pull up in her driveway in his black car. She said she was still grieving. She talked about her anger with DeeDee. And she wondered what her son's last moments were like. Quote, "I just think about all the lies that woman told me, and she had me believing her story. I try to imagine what he has gone through. I think about it every day. Was he buried half alive?" She said to keep her mind distracted, right, from such thoughts, she read a lot of, like, religious books, such as The Names of God, took the bus to Walmart or Lakeland Square just to be around people. Quote, "I don't get a lot of visitors. Sometimes I feel like I'm the only one on earth. That's bad, ain't it? Maybe if I had a little work to go to, it would give me something to do." Isn't that heartbreaking? As if this woman hasn't suffered enough. She also said that she would like to have some of her son's, like, personal things, like there was a necklace that he always wore that she would like, or maybe some of his clothes. But all she had was the CD player that Abraham had brought her on her birthday. Archie, Abraham's oldest brother, also spoke in the article, and he said that he wanted people to know just how much his mother has suffered. He even mentioned that she had been hospitalized from stress earlier that year. Quote, "I just want closure to my brother's death. I feel like my mom should be compensated for the frustration and aggravation about my brother." Now, while Abraham's estate was fighting, right, to get Abraham's stuff back from DeeDee, the estate just represented Jeremiah and Moses. Apparently, due to, like, Florida state laws, Elizabeth was not eligible to inherit her son's, like, fortune. Unless it's, of course, specified in a will. But remember, we talked about that earlier, Elizabeth didn't want that. But Elizabeth said that she wouldn't even want it, even if she did have a claim to it. She talked about how she, right, still stayed in her small, like, wooden house that she had raised her boys in, even though Abraham had tried to buy her a new house in Winter Haven. But what she really wanted was something she could never get. Quote, "Things would really brighten my day if Abraham could drive up in that black car. He was always so kind-hearted. Sometimes I would think of him when he was a little boy eating his Sugar Smacks cereal." On Tuesday, June 14th, 2011, Officer McKay Young was fired by the Lakeland Police Department, specifically by the police department's police chief, Lisa Womack. And I guess there was 3 separate investigations that found he violated department policy. On Monday, August 22nd, 2011, Judge Sleet set a March 2012 date for DeeDee's trial. At this same hearing, her attorney, who was now Randall O. Reeder, or maybe it's Redder, asked Judge Sleet for help in recovering 118 items they claim that police had that were DeeDee's. And this included, like, jewelry, electronics, and cash. Judge Sleet refused to hear the motion, though, saying that he wasn't even the right judge to hear it. But Redder said that they were going to appeal that. Quote, "We're just asking them to return everything that's not going to be used as evidence. Most of the 118 items are pieces of jewelry Miss Moore has acquired through the years. We have pictures of her wearing some of them at her high school prom." On Friday, October 7th of that year, Abraham's family, or rather Abraham's estate, through their attorney, Stephen Martin, sued DeeDee, accusing her of stealing $246,493 worth of Abraham's, like, property and assets around the beginning of January of 2009. The suit listed 121 items that they accused DeeDee of taking. A lot of these things were on DeeDee's 118 itemized list. You know, the list that she was saying was that the stuff was hers. And this included 2 iPods, a Sony HD Handycam camera, a radar detector, 100 pieces of jewelry, including a diamond-encrusted toe ring, ew, computers and data storage devices. The suit also said that about a month later, DeeDee then took $1 million more and misappropriated it for herself. On Friday, November 2nd, 2012, a competency hearing was held to determine if DeeDee was competent enough to go to trial. 2 court-appointed psychologists testified that they believed that, yes, DeeDee was competent enough to stand trial. Quote, "At times, she was a little tangential. She could get sidetracked, but I could always get her back." And this was according to one of the psychologists, Randy Otto. Now, DeeDee agreed with them, and she wanted to go to trial. She was convinced that the facts would vindicate her, guys. But the defense brought in their own psychiatrist, Dr. Michael Marr, who testified that he believes, all right, DeeDee doesn't believe that she's lying. Quote, "The problem is that she discloses so much information in a confused, tangential, and sometimes irrational way." He said DeeDee could not focus on a question, her responses didn't make much sense, and he concluded that she was out of touch with reality and was therefore not competent enough to stand trial. And I gotta tell you, man, after we get into this trial, I kind of agree with him. Now, since one of the court-appointed psychologists who said that DeeDee was competent, Dr. Richard Carpenter, did not do a full evaluation of DeeDee, Hillsborough County Circuit Court Judge Emmett Lamar Battles ordered an additional evaluation of DeeDee be done by Dr. Carpenter, and he would hear that testimony on the 19th. At that hearing, Dr. Carpenter testified that in his hour-long evaluation of DeeDee, she definitely showed signs of major depressive disorder and mild symptoms of ADHD. Quote, "Neither of these prevents competency." He said DeeDee was, quote, "completely lucid and shows, quote, no evidence of psychosis." Her defense attorneys tried to point out that that was what DeeDee wanted, so she consciously acted in a way that would get Dr. Carpenter to give her the diagnosis she wanted. He responded to that by saying it was pretty clear that she wanted to be found competent, but that didn't necessarily mean that she had a problem that she was attempting to hide, you know? Quote, "It would be a very interesting strategy for a defendant to feign being competent, quote, when they're not." At this hearing, I guess DeeDee fidgeted with a rosary. She shuffled through files. She was clearly engaged in what was going on. And she occasionally opened a red book titled, "I am innocent," with an exclamation point. In the end, Judge Battles ruled, quote, "The court is convinced that she indeed meets the statutory requirement for a competency. She has sufficient rational understanding." On Monday, November 26th, 2012, jury selection began. So yeah, obviously it had been delayed, probably because of the competency hearings. And it was at this first day of jury selection that it was also determined that all of the interviews that DeeDee had had with detectives were completely admissible because she spoke to them out of her own free will. After 12 hours over the course of 2 days, a jury was finally impaneled. But get this, not before Judge Battles chastised DeeDee over what he perceived to be overly friendly body language directed at a prospective juror. Yeah, what the hell? He also chastised, it was either a family member or friend of Abraham's, for directing a hostile hand gesture towards DeeDee. It's probably one of these. DeeDee's trial would start on Wednesday, November 28th, and prosecutors contended that DeeDee had ingratiated herself to Abraham, then used his ignorance to con him out of all of his money, specifically out of the last $1.5 million he had. Assistant State Attorney Jay Pruner maintained that Abraham was afraid that he would lose the rest of his money in the child support case with Tori. And DeeDee, he maintained, quote, fanned the flames of that fear. And she convinced Abraham to transfer a bunch of money to joint accounts or her accounts. Quote, "This defendant killed Abraham Shakespeare and took calculated steps to avoid detection, apprehension, and the truth. She had the motive to do so. She killed him with her own gun. She buried him on her property." The defense, which was led by Byron Heilman, I don't know why she's going through so many attorneys, insisted that DeeDee was only trying to help Abraham out, help him through a very difficult time. Hellman said that it was Abraham's idea to set up LLCs and to set up joint accounts with DeeDee, and specifically to create the LLC to collect on the debts that people owed him. He also said that it was Abraham who, quote, had an interest to get away from everything. The defense said that there was no physical evidence tying DeeDee to the murder, and they maintained that someone else had murdered Abraham. Quote, "There are no eyewitnesses that can testify that Miss Moore shot and killed Mr. Shakespeare or had any part in carrying out his murder. There is no proof the revolver is in fact the murder weapon. The ballistics are inconclusive. Adding there, quote, are no fingerprints linking Miss Moore to Mr. Shakespeare's body. In fact, there's DNA that suggests there may be an alternative suspect present at the time when blood was shed. So the defense's story, right, was on the day that Abraham died. He had asked DeeDee to meet him at the property on State Road 60. Quote, he had a business meeting with other men. He needed cash that she temporarily stored in a safe in her office. He needed her to open the safe. They stated that DeeDee knew there were other men at this meeting, but she did not sit in on this meeting. And they stated that it was one of these unknown men in the meeting that killed Abraham. The defense also had an excuse for all those damning recorded phone conversations with Gregory. They said that Gregory only cooperated with authorities to, quote, take the heat off himself and maybe others who owed money to Mr. Shakespeare. Even going so far as to say Gregory framed DeeDee for the murder. What? But get this, on only the second day of the trial, DeeDee was admonished by Judge Battles for what he described as animated responses during the testimony of witnesses. And this included Detectives Lynn and Clark and Elizabeth. I guess she would just gesture, nod, or show some other body language when these testimonies were being given or when damning recordings were being played. And just before noon, Judge Battles had had enough. He interrupted the proceedings and told her that her expressive demeanor during testimony was being seen as an attempt to, quote, to speak from that table rather than from the witness stand. And he told her not to nod, gesture, or make any other actions while testimony was ongoing. Quote, it is not in your best interest and it is not acceptable. And this would be the first of many times that DeeDee would be chastised by Judge Battles. On Friday, November 30th, the trial was delayed a little bit after DeeDee had some sort of adverse reaction to some medication. I guess she had been late in getting her regular meds, and then she took some other meds that caused her tongue to swell up a little bit. But it didn't seem to be that serious because testimony resumed that same day. And this is when jurors heard, I know one of the things they heard was that recorded conversation with Cedric, Abraham's cousin. So when the recordings between DeeDee and Gregory, and DeeDee, Gregory, and Officer Smith were played, DeeDee listened through headphones, right? There was 9 hours of conversations. And finally, I guess in the 9th hour, DeeDee just finally collapsed on the table and sobbed. Shar also testified, recounting everything. He said when investigators had come to him in 2010 and informed him that his Corvette may have been bought with stolen money, he immediately relinquished it to them. And when Shar testified, he was now married, hopefully to someone, better and more properly his age, and lived in Atlanta, Georgia. Doug, remember Doug Hancock from Bank of America, also testified. And he testified to what we went over, but he also added that at some point, DeeDee called him, quote, almost hysterical, saying Abraham was trying to kill her over how she handled the money. He testified that after this phone call, at some point, DeeDee came to his office and tried to present him with a $20,000 check. Quote, I thank you for keeping Abraham away from the money. Doug turned the check over to security. Now, on Thursday, December 6th, DeeDee had a full-blown theatrical, emotional meltdown in court. It was actually in the middle of Tori's testimony. And it was when Tori was talking about how DeeDee had offered her a house and even a car if she would lie and say that she had seen Abraham. She testified that DeeDee had driven a wedge between her and Abraham, telling Abraham that all Tori wanted was to, quote, clean him out, while at the same time telling Tori that she could get her a lawyer to take Abraham for, quote, everything he's worth. She said that her and Abraham did remain friends after the breakup, that he never physically hurt her, and that he always gave her money for child support. And I guess, it was right when she was saying these things that DeeDee just had a full-on meltdown, and she burst out, quote, I'm tired of these people lying. This is my life. This is my life, and she is lying. The jury was, of course, let out of the courtroom, and DeeDee began protesting loudly that she wanted the jury to see a video that she says would prove that Tori is lying. It was a video she recorded of Tori, 2010, but DeeDee's defense lawyers had recommended her not using it. But I guess when Heilman tried to tell her that they really shouldn't use it, she just had a full-on childish tantrum meltdown, and she started sobbing hysterically as Heilman and his, co-counsel went through boxes trying to find the tape. Can you believe this? Heilman just told the judge, quote, "We have a difference of opinion," as, his counsel was, looking through the files, and DeeDee was just sitting there bawling her eyes out. Judge Battles gave the defense all of lunch to look for the video, and he chastised DeeDee, telling her, quote, "Compose yourself." Now, it was well after lunchtime when they finally found the video. It was played for Judge Battles, obviously, right, without the jury. So it was a video of Tori in a provocative blouse. She had tousled hair. She looked, I think she was supposed to have looked, pretty sultry. She was complaining that Abraham beat her, gave her no money for child support, and told her that he had AIDS. So the jury was let back in, and the defense was allowed to cross-examine Tori. And Tori openly admitted to making the video. She's like, "Yeah, I made that video after DeeDee had shown up at my house to make it." She said that DeeDee showed up to her house one day with the recorder, and she also gave Tori those lines to say. She said that DeeDee told her that the video would, be put online, and it would sort of force Abraham to come out of hiding. And she added that DeeDee made her change out of her muumuu that she was wearing and into that provocative blouse in the video, telling her it would make the video more enticing. Now, interestingly enough, during Tori's cross-examination, DeeDee was pretty quiet. She did have other outbursts that included openly sobbing and bawling, especially when damning evidence or recordings or something was discussed. She would avert her face from the jury. She'd close her eyes. She was very animated. When the prosecution rested its case on Friday, December 7th, the defense then had to decide if DeeDee would testify in her own defense. By Monday, December 10th, it was still not known if DeeDee would take the stand, and I guess at some point, she had to be temporarily banned from the courtroom over concerns that she might have threatened some jurors. I couldn't find any elaboration on that. But she was back in court later that same day, and there she announced that she was not going to testify in order to protect her family. In his closing arguments, Pruner described DeeDee as a greedy woman who wasn't satisfied with the success of AMP. Quote, "It wasn't enough for her. Greed. Simple, everyday greed motivated her, flowed through her veins." He said that she was a con artist who took advantage of Abraham's financial illiteracy. Quote, "He was illiterate. He was not sophisticated in financial matters. Shakespeare eventually got suspicious when he could no longer access his remaining cash. She knew what she had to do. She got every bit of his money. He found out about it and threatened to kill her. She killed him first." Pruner even told jurors to look at that video DeeDee had recorded of Abraham, saying that where he wanted to go and stuff. And he told the jurors to really look at the clothing he was wearing. And he said the clothes that Abraham was wearing in that video was awfully similar to the clothes that his remains were found in. And he suggested that that video was recorded the night that she killed Abraham in order to establish her alibi. Heilman argued that there were other suspects that police never even considered, and that his client's behavior was that of a, quote, "desperate, panicked, perhaps emotionally unstable woman in an awful situation." Quote, "There were a lot of people who owed Mr. Shakespeare a lot of money. One guy owed him $1 million. The police focused on DeeDee Moore, and they didn't even consider other people. There's no question that DeeDee Moore did lots of things to try to persuade folks that Mr. Shakespeare was either alive or at a certain other place for certain other reasons. Moore took steps to make it appear Shakespeare was still alive and attempted to get someone else to take the blame for his disappearance because she was afraid of the real killers and also being charged with Shakespeare's slaying." So out of the jury's presence, Judge Battles chastised DeeDee because she openly sobbed during Heilman's closing arguments. Quote, "That is to stop." So the jury started deliberating at 4:12 p.m. and a little more than 3 hours later, the jury came back on that same Monday, December 10th, 2012, at 7:39 p.m. and found DeeDee guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to the automatic life in prison without the possibility of parole. Judge Battles called her, quote, "the most manipulative person he had ever seen." Quote, "Abraham Shakespeare was your prey and your victim," describing her as, quote, "cold, calculating, and cruel." He also sentenced her to an additional minimum sentence of 25 years for possessing a gun in the course of a violent felony. Now, surprisingly, DeeDee showed no emotion at all when the verdict was read, and neither did Elizabeth. Afterwards, Heilman said that he did the best that he could with what he had. right? Quote, I feel sad for the victim. I feel sad for their families. I feel sad for the defendant because these types of cases are no-win situations. DeeDee had at least one supporter, though. It was someone who had once served time with her. It was a former inmate named Rose Condora. And she told the press that she visited her friend every night in jail. Quote, she's not what people think she is. She did not kill that man. DeeDee is serving her time at the Lowell Correctional Center in Ocala. So right after she had been convicted, Abraham's estate started a series of civil suits, beginning with getting Abraham's home and other assets out of DeeDee's possession. At some point in 2011, Hillsborough County Circuit Court Judge J. Dale Durrance ruled that DeeDee's Tampa attorney at that time, Randall O. Redder, disobeyed court orders by entering the home, Abraham's home, and changing the billing address for the electricity account to his own address. Durrance found him in contempt of court and ordered him to repay certain expenses, including attorney's fees, and he was to pay this to Abraham's estate. However, on Friday, December 14th, the 2nd District Court of Appeals struck down Durrance's ruling, saying Redder did not violate the plain language of any court order, and that none of Durrance's court orders had explicitly said that Redder could not enter the residence. They ruled, though he may have intended to include that in his court order, it did not specifically state it, right? Quote, and unlike in horseshoe pitching, coming close to the target in a court of law is not close enough to score a finding of contempt. In early of May of 2013, Abraham's estate was trying to sue Bank of America, saying that the bank didn't properly protect Abraham's money that was completely dwindling from DeeDee. They said that bank employees should have seen the weird transactions and the weird withdrawals that DeeDee was making from the account. Quote, they could have prevented what happened. And this was according to the estate's attorney, Martin. And he said the former manager and the other employees neglected to, quote, heed the red flags of fraud. And the suit was saying that Bank of America was negligent because Abraham was, quote, adamant that he had access to his money. But DeeDee, as we know, right, had been able to remove him as a signatory on the account. On Friday, October 4th, 2013, Abraham's home that he had bought in January of 2007 was finally returned to his estate. Judge Durrance ruled that DeeDee never paid for the home, and he ordered it returned to the estate. And this was one of the things that DeeDee claimed to have paid in cash, is Abraham's home. And that's why there's no, financial transaction of it. Martin said that the house was going to be sold to benefit Moses and Jeremiah. And Judge Durrance also ruled that some of the mortgages that DeeDee had taken over be returned back to Abraham's estate. In 2015, the Florida Appeals Court upheld DeeDee's conviction, calling her claims of innocence confusing, conclusory, and vague. On Thursday, June 8th, 2017, Antoinette, the mother of Abraham's oldest son, Moses, won $1 million in a $20 scratch-off $5 million Monopoly game. It was from a Florida lottery ticket, and she bought it at a Circle K. And she said, quote, I am a little scared. It still doesn't seem real. Of course, remembering, right, what happened to Abraham and all the publicity and stuff, right? Antoinette said that she typically spent about $100 a day on lottery tickets, or specifically, scratch-off tickets. But that Thursday was a light day. She only spent $20. Quote, I brought it home and started scratching. I got to the third number and started screaming, hollering, and crying. And she told her 14-year-old daughter, quote, your mama just won $1 million. She called up her oldest son, Raheem Dumas. He was 24. I think he lived somewhere else. And he only believed her after she sent him a photo. Moses was 16 years old at this point, and he would have access to his trust fund in 2 more years when he was 18. Raheem told the press that his mother did have a gambling addiction, but it was way better than the drug addiction that she had battled in the past. Quote, as long as we have the bills paid, that's what I love to do, is what she said. She chose the one-time cash payout of $770,000, and her and Raheem stated that they were probably going to move away, at least out of the Lakeland area, and start anew. Antoinette said that she wanted to buy Raheem a new truck and new houses for her and her older daughter. Quote, that's all I really want. And in 2017, DeeDee filed the first of many attempts at appeals seeking post-conviction relief. She made 4 claims of ineffective assistance of counsel, 3 based on her trial, and 1 citing alleged failures of her appellate attorney. Now, Hillsborough County Circuit Court Judge Michelle Cisco denied some of DeeDee's claims, dismissed other of her claims, but did allow DeeDee to modify and refile others. And this would start the year-long process of DeeDee trying to get out of prison. So in April of 2019, DeeDee expanded on her claims in a 48-page amended motion, which included a 10-page handwritten addendum, the beginning of which started, quote, "I'm truly sorry to the prosecutor, Abraham's mom, and others that I hurt by not being truthful. I regret my actions. I'm deeply embarrassed by them, but I have nothing to lose now. My son is in another state. My mom has moved and my dad has passed away. I'm not seeking sympathy or you to twist this letter around. I'm begging for you to look at the real evidence because I really did not kill him. I always believed in the justice system, but they allowed people they knew were lying to take the stand. I never hid that I was lying. They kept threatening to arrest innocent people. I'm begging for justice to work as it was put in place to do. I did not help matters, but I knew when they fully investigated, they would find out everything, something they never did. Detectives lied right on the stand, not caring about the cost. They did whatever they had to do to get a conviction, and that's not right. Give me a chance to show all my evidence not to be manipulated with lies I can prove untrue as you watch each and every video in discovery. I was really taping for my book because I could not believe all the things that went on. Some videos may never be allowed to be shown because it puts the victim in a negative light, and I completely understand that. It's still not right for the prosecutor to allow them to lie just because all the video can't be shown when he knows it's a lie. I know he's just doing his job, but I'm a real person, not just a number. Please excuse type errors. Only had 60 days to respond. Thank you for your time, DeeDee Moore." She listed 12 grounds for seeking either a nullification of her conviction or a new trial, and they all involved Heilman. She claimed there was evidence that proved Abraham was alive after police said that she killed him, and she claimed Heilman failed to investigate and present supporting evidence for her. Quote, "There was 3 DNAs on the carpet that no one understood that during the trial." She said he failed to call witnesses who could have refuted the prosecution's claims. She claimed that he should have filed a motion to block highly prejudicial statements from Detective Clark, who said on stand how DeeDee had sexually propositioned him on more than one occasion. In her motion, DeeDee also said that Heilman failed to present a reasonable hypothesis of innocence to the jury. Quote, "He put no defense on, absolutely none. He was horrible." In her addendum, she also alleged prosecutorial misconduct, claiming that the state manipulated the evidence during the trial, failed to show evidence favorable to her. Why would they do that? And asserted that prosecutors allowed false testimony from witnesses. In 2020, then state attorney for the 13th Judicial Circuit, Andrew Warren, filed a detailed response to DeeDee's claims. He did concede that there was an evidentiary hearing that should be held to determine, who belongs to that unknown DNA. And at that hearing, which was held on Wednesday, July 12th, 2023, in Tampa, one of DeeDee's former attorneys, Christopher Bolt, testified for the prosecution, and he said the defense team at trial did nothing wrong. Quote, "She was a management challenge. It was difficult to have a normal conversation with her." DeeDee claimed at that hearing that Lakeland police officers were taking bribes from drug dealers. Quote, "They're being paid under the table because cocaine dealers can afford it a lot." LPD had no comment on that allegation. She also accused Gregory of being the real killer. Even though he had recently passed away in June of 2023, she claimed Gregory shot Abraham after he found out that he had slept with his wife. DeeDee, of course, presented no evidence whatsoever to back up her claims. She also stated that she had recordings that proved her innocence. One of the videos that she claimed to have was one of Antoinette claiming that one of the real killers was a drug dealer, and that this drug dealer paid detectives to go after DeeDee. At this point in time, unfortunately, Antoinette had also passed away. And apparently, at some point in time, DeeDee had even pointed the finger at her. Oh, and Heilman had also passed away in January of 2023. Isn't it curious how all these people that DeeDee has all this beef with, they're all dead? As of right now, it looks like Judge Sisko has not ruled on this hearing. The latest information I could find on this was the hearing that was held in July of 2023. But I just thought this was funny, and I wanted to share this with you before we end it. In March of 2022, Florida passed a law where the name of lottery winners of more than $250,000 would be kept secret for 90 days. And this law had a surprise supporter in DeeDee. She actually thought 90 days wasn't long enough. Quote, "I don't feel that's enough time. You've got to understand, this person has to change their whole life around. 90 days is nothing. You see how quick time flies." And that was the tragic, sad, unfortunate tale of lottery winner Abraham Shakespeare, who unfortunately, just attracted sharks, man. It's like blood in the water, right? What do you guys think of DeeDee? I really do. Like, obviously, she killed him. All right, she killed him. But this is where I struggle. Like, okay, so yes, DeeDee is technically, like, competent, but, like, she's delusional. She's in Delulu land. Like, she legitimately believes she didn't kill Abraham. What do you do with people like that? Like, I feel like she really needs to be locked away and monitored in, like, some sort of mental health facility. And if she ever has the come to Jesus moment where she's, like, lucid and stuff, then she can be put in prison. But I don't know, man. Like, I think she's a true believer. I think she believes her own bull. What do you guys think? All right. Whew. Well, I'm tired. I'm hungry. I have a little bit of a headache. So I'm going to wrap this up. I hope you guys have a wonderful couple weeks. I hope I can post another video in 2 weeks because, man, I've got a whopper for you. Like, it's incredible, dude. People are so stupid. In the meantime, take care out there. I hope you have a wonderful fall season. Remember, don't be a dick. Don't be an unjustified dick, you know? Leave a little sparkle wherever you go. Alrighty, guys. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.